Okay, it's 2 p.m., so we'll start the meeting today. So I'll call to order the March 7th, 2025 KMPUD regularly scheduled board meeting. Agenda item 2 is roll call.
Yeah. Mr. Taronda,
Here.
Schroeder,
Here.
Epstein,
Present.
Tucker,
Uh,
absent.
Chris is absent. The hotel he's staying at in Zurich would not post the agenda for him, so he cannot participate as a board member in the meeting, though he said he was going to call in and listen.
And Dornbrook here.
All right. We have a quorum. Let's move on to agenda item number 3, announcements. Eric.
I'd just like to welcome everybody to the regularly scheduled meeting, and if you're online, please use the raise your hand function to speak.
And then I would also add to announcement would be that we need to do all of our votes via roll call today.
Yes, we do.
Okay. We'll do roll call votes for everyone on the board. All right. Agenda item 4, corrections to the agenda or the consent calendar. Does anyone have any corrections?
No.
No. Do you have any corrections?
No.
Okay. Let's move on to item number 5, comments from the audience. This is an opportunity for the members of the public to address the board on any short non-agenda items that are within our jurisdiction. We cannot have discussion or action on matters not listed on the agenda for the Brown Act. And I will just remind you that this is for things that are not on the agenda. So if you have comments on things that are on the agenda, please hold your comments till that time. Okay.
I don't see any hands, Doug.
Okay. Okay, we'll move on here then to agenda item number 6, written comments from the public. There were no written comments in the general section of it, but I will acknowledge the ones that we did receive later in the detailed agenda items that those come with. Number 7, adoption of the consent calendar. We have 3 items here: the board meeting minutes from February 7th, 2025, consent for claims, and the receivables and shut-offs report. I'll accept the motion to adopt.
Motion to approve.
Okay, John, thank you. So second.
Dornbrook, I'll second that.
Great. Can we have a roll call vote, please, Peter?
Sure. Taronda.
Aye.
Schroeder. Aye. Epstein.
Aye.
Dornbrook, aye.
All right. All approved. Thank you. All right. There were no items brought forward on agenda item number 8. So we will move on to agenda item number 9, which is the KVFD 218 engineering assessment study. I'll hand it over to Eric to work with our consultants on this one. Thank you.
Sure. So I'll just hand this over to Ed and Brandon with Francisco Associates to follow up on comments they received previously. You're muted, Ed, and you're showing the Zoom screen. I think you meant to show your PowerPoint. That's the one. Still muted, though.
Can everybody see my screen now?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
All right. All right. Good afternoon, members of the board and Kirkwood community. So this afternoon, what we'd like to do is address the feedback and some of the comments we got from the community. And so we've looked into all the various questions and concerns, and we'd like to walk through our findings this afternoon. So the very first thing is we got a question about, can the assessment be based on fair market value of real estate or of property? And the answer on that is no. Is Proposition 218 explicitly prohibits that. We cannot establish any sort of assessment simply based on property value. So that is something that we cannot incorporate into the methodology. And so that has not been done since the last time we met last month at our board meeting last month. The second thing that came up was a question about, can the assessment be adjusted so that it is based on building square footage versus how it is now, which is based on EDU factors, equivalent dwelling units. And so what we've done there is we've we researched over 10 engineers reports that have recently been prepared over the last 5 years. And what we found is that none of them are based on building square footage. And we think the reason for that is because there is no direct, excuse me, there's no direct correlation between building square footage and fire risk. And so for that reason, I believe the intent across many fire assessments that have been established in the state over the last 5 years, the assessment is not simply based on building square footage on the residential side. And so that is the way that it currently sits today with the fire assessment in Kirkwood. The assessment is based on an EDU factor, and we've differentiated amongst different land uses within the residential category. So single family home gets assigned an EDU factor of 1, and it is the baseline of comparison to the other land uses on the residential side. And then we have a condominium EDU factor that pays a lower assessment. And then we've also established a factor for employee housing, or an employee housing category. So, so the methodology today is still based on the EDU concept versus building square footage. The thing that we have done, though, is we took a look at all the properties within Kirkwood specifically, and we did notice some outliers, both on the single family side and also for condominiums. For single family, we found properties that are larger than the typical and also smaller than the typical single family home. And then condominiums, we identified some condominiums that are much larger than the typical condominium. And so what we did to account for these outliers is we identified what the average building square footage across the state of California is for a standard single family home, and what we found via data from the Federal Reserve and also real estate data is that in California, the average single family home is approximately 1,750 square feet. So to account for outliers within Kirkwood, what we did is we identified single family homes that are less than the average single family home, meaning less than 1,750 square feet. And we identified condominiums that are larger than the standard single family homes, or the 1,750 square feet. And in order to more appropriately establish the land uses, or equitably establish the assessment, we lowered the assessment of the smaller homes that are more similar to a condo than they are a single family home from the standpoint of building square footage. We're assessing those equally to a condominium now. And then we did the inverse for a condominium. So if your building square footage is higher than that of a standard single family home, you're more similar to a single family home than you are a condominium. And we're assessing you equally to a single family home in terms of the improved value component of the assessment. So we did make that adjustment to account for outliers, but the methodology is still the same as we presented back in February, meaning it's all still based on the EDU concept versus a rate per building square foot when it comes to residential property. The last thing that we have here on our list of questions that came up was a question about the escalator. And I believe the request was, can the annual escalator be based on an index for the Sacramento region? And there's a couple things there. Is number one, the Bureau of Labor and Statistics does not publish an index for the Sacramento area. Only the closest index is the one that's being utilized, which is the index for the San Francisco Bay Area. And then also what we did is we took a look at the 5-year average of the San Francisco CPI as compared to many other West Coast indices. And it turns out that San Francisco is actually the lowest out of all the other indices that we compared it against that are all West Coast, California indices. So for that reason, the San Francisco Bay Index is still the one that we're implementing in the assessment methodology, and that will be incorporated into the engineer's report. So with all that being said, this slide here is a summary of the assessment rates. The land component on the residential side is on a per lot square footage basis, and that is 0.0068 per lot square foot. And the building component is $1,182 per EDU, or per single family home, if you will. So that's what the improved value component is. And so the total assessment on the residential side is a combination of the land component and the building component. And we'll go through an example of what that calculation looks like in a minute. So those are the proposed assessments on the residential side. On the commercial side, there's an additional benefit factor of 2.3 that's been applied to account for the additional demand on fire services that commercial property creates for fire services. So that 2.3 factor is applied to all commercial and all commercial office parcels. And so when we apply that intensity factor, the land component is 0.0157 cents per lot square foot. And then for the building component side of things, it's $2,720 per equivalent dwelling unit. So the goal in comparing commercial property to residential property is to establish proportionality. So every land use, it's all relative to a single family home. So that's why you're seeing all the rates here being established on a per EDU basis. So on the building component side, it's $2,720 per EDU per 1,000 building square feet of building for non-residential property. And similar to residential, the total assessment is the sum of the land component and the building component. And we'll go through an example of that here in a minute. And then lastly, these assessment rates, these proposed rates will increase annually by the change in the San Francisco Bay CPI for the month of April, which is very much in alignment with all the other rates and fees that are applicable in Kirkwood. So let's just walk through a couple of examples of the assessment calculation. So starting out with on the residential side, for a single family home, the land component for an average, the average single family parcel is about $122, because the average lot is 18,000 square feet. So if we apply the rate of 0.0068 cents per lot square foot, multiply it by the 18,000, you get $122. And then the single family home, if you're at the average or above in terms of building square footage, so if you are 1,750 building square feet or more, you pay $1,182 per home. So the combination of those two components equals $1,304. So that's the average single family home in within the boundaries of the district. And overall, in aggregate, residential property accounts for approximately 60% of the budget, or the target budget of 1.2 million in terms of what we're looking to generate with the assessment revenue. So that 60% is $725,400 is what is anticipated to be generated from residential property in through the fire assessment. And then on the commercial side, the land component is 0.0157 cents per lot square foot. And so if we're taking a lot of 20,000 lot square feet as an example, that assessment would be $314. And then on the improved side for building, for the building component for commercial property, it's 0.67 EDU. So 0.67 of the $1,182. And that, it's 0.67 of the $2,720 because the intensity factor has been applied, and the intensity factor of 2.3 has been applied. And so that multiplied by, here the example is 2,000 building square feet, divided by the 1,000, because the assessment rate is developed based on a per 1,000 building square foot basis. The total assessment there is $3,645. And if we sum the two together, the total assessment for this particular commercial parcel, this example, would be a little under $3,959. And in aggregate, commercial property makes up the remaining 40% of the target 1.2 million that is to be generated through assessments. And so that number looks to be a little under 475,000, 474,600. So those are the modifications that have been made since our last board meeting on February 7th. And so with that, I'd be happy to address any questions the board or any member of the public may have.
Yeah, I've got a.
Do you want to do, we typically do community comments and then board, or do you, is that okay?
Sure.
Right, Eric? I mean, that's, so, let me just jump on you.
Push the red button.
Okay. So, like we did last time, we'll do community comments first, and everyone has up to 3 minutes to provide their comments or questions, and then we'll close community comments and then have board discussion and questions and comments from the board, and then we'll take actions if needed. So, I'm seeing hands up on Zoom. I don't see anyone in the room coming up. If you're coming in the room, please come up to the podium. The microphone here will hear you nicely. So if you could come up to the podium here, we'll start with the people in the room first. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. My name is Don Havard. I'm a newly hired controller for a master developer, Chuck Cobb and Kirkwood Property Services. And I, and along with John Ryder, which is listening virtually, I've been tasked to throw our combined resources behind this priority of finding a solution for funding of the KBFD. It's nice to meet you all, see some of you for the very first time. Look forward to working with you in the future. Overall, the position of the master developer for this plan is that it seems to place a disproportionate responsibility on the backs of the local property owners for such a vital service that the existing property tax revenue should already be funding. I am tasked to assist John in leading the approach to Alpine and Amador counties in order to find a solution that is more proportionate. John is attending this meeting virtually, and right now he'd like to say a few words and reinforce our commitment to this issue. And I further look forward to working with all of you and getting to know you over time through my service here at APS and with the master developer. Thank you. And if you could, John is online right now.
Sure. Can we switch over then?
Sure, I can do that.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
You can unmute John, you should be good to go.
Yeah, great. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, and thank you, Don. Yeah, it's this is, as I said last week at the committee meeting, this is concerning to us as another layered cost into the Kirkwood Valley and its ownership, including master developer. We completely support having the EMT and fire department services here in the valley, to have them expanded. But as Don mentioned, and all of our shareholders, including Chairman Chuck Cobb, just don't think it's fair. We really want to be a key cog in engaging the counties, the KMPUD, of course, Vail, ourselves, to let's start having some meaningful dialogue about how to change this structure, how to change this tax sharing. I know we're under circa 1985 agreements whereby a good portion of Kirkwood real estate taxes go toward the county. And we just to date don't see, and especially now don't see, the reciprocal proportional share of services coming into the Kirkwood Valley. So what we'd like to propose is let's start as soon as possible, and we're happy to take a role as driving the issue of engaging in the meaningful conversations and discussions to change this math, because we just don't see it working anymore. Kirkwood is very, very, very cost fatigued right now, as you can only imagine. And we just feel there's a better mousetrap out there, and would like to be a key participant in having those conversations and figuring out a formula that is just better for all and keeps Kirkwood rolling. We know we have a responsibility to support our counties. We also have a responsibility to support the Kirkwood Valley. So with that, look forward to us reaching out to discuss with supervisors and leadership at the KMPUD and Vail to see if we can't just really meaningfully start to push that dialogue and try to figure out something that really works going forward. Thanks.
Thank you. I will also just note, we have agenda item 9B to talk about maybe general comments on the KVFD and maybe just general funding like that, because we do have some Jeff Brown and Terry Woodrow online, and we hope to have them talk about some of the county stuff. So I'd like to maybe focus some of this on the assessment itself and the formulation as a potential methodology first, and then 9B for more of like the general commentary. So that sound good? So that noted. Does anyone else? So we have any other hands up? See one more, Eric?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Carrie, you can
Carrie.
unmute yourself now.
Good afternoon. Yeah, unfortunately, my time is a little limited, so I'm going to go ahead and make this comment at this time, as the others have. It caught my attention in recent KMPUD meetings that it was stated that counties have been asked for additional funds multiple times. In learning more about how the allocation process works, I've learned that it's primarily dictated by state statutes, for example, AB 8 from 1979. The multiple people I spoke with at Alpine County said individually that they had no knowledge of recent requests from KMPUD or any other Kirkwood entity to obtain more funds. And any request for money, as you all know, would need to be made through a formal written process. It would not be casual requests from KMPUD to these counties. These requests would likely have become agenda board items for the Board of Supervisors meetings. And I'm not convinced that sufficient recent formal efforts have been made from KMPUD to obtain more funds for this fire department. And I am really pushing this board to I'm asking directly, why is moving to a local assessment to fund $1.7 million for basic services seemingly the first move? And why isn't pursuing county funding being fully exhausted first? Thank you.
Why don't we answer that in 9B, Eric? Does that sound good?
Sure.
Okay.
Let's have your hands up on about the methodology.
Okay. In terms of action now, is there anything that we need to, I think in terms of the voting and in terms of approving this, because this isn't the engineering report, so are we just giving acknowledgement that this is to move forward with the engineering report at this point, or do we need a vote?
No vote, but I think John and Bob both had
Yep.
questions.
Okay.
Yeah, mine just limited to the 218 assessment, which is, we hired you because you're a subject matter expert and you've got visibility into 218 processes at other organizations. So you've got more expertise in this area. That's why we retained you. But doesn't it seem odd that square footage isn't applied to residences, but it's applied to commercial, and then you've created two tiers based on square footage for residential? I mean, it just logically doesn't track very well for me. Like either square footage matters or it doesn't.
Sure, that's a great question. There's not two tiers of square footage for residential on the land side. there's only one assessment. So if we go back here, if on the residential side, all residential property pays this rate per lot square foot. So the difference on the land side is if you're commercial.
No. Sorry, I'll save your, the square footage of the home. You created two tiers, 1,750 square feet, and larger and smaller.
Okay.
So it's kind of just illogical to me to say square footage doesn't matter, but we're going to create two tiers based on square footage. And then further, we're going to do commercial on square footage. So I'm not really advocating for anything. It just doesn't track for me very well.
Sure. So the reason, and I think you had mentioned that, why are we using building square footage when it comes to non-residential? So because we have to establish proportionality across all the various land uses within the district. So regardless if you're single family or commercial or industrial or whatever the case may be, everything is always relative to a single family home. So what we've done for the non-residential side of things, we've established an EDU factor based on the standard single family home. So that EDU factor on the commercial side is this 0.67 EDUs per 1,000 building square feet. So the proportion is always going back to how relative is it to a single family home. And that EDU methodology allows there to be proportionality in the assessment regardless of land use. And so it's very, very common when comparing residential, so single family homes, to non-residential, that on the non-residential, usually what you always see is it's an area-based assessment. A lot of times it's purely lot square footage. Sometimes it's just building square footage. Sometimes it's both, depending upon what you're looking to fund and what type of assessment it is. But always what's happening with an EDU methodology is it's always on the non-residential side, the factors and the dollar amount per lot area or per building square foot is always being assigned relative to a single family home. So that's
I really was asking about adding the 1,750 or higher, 1,750 or lower to condos and residential homes.
Okay.
If
So
square footage isn't a factor in benefit received for residential, then why would you use square footage to create two tiers? That's what is illogical to me.
Okay, so yeah, let's address that point. Sorry, I was trying to go one by one, but so on this one, this is a modification we made since the last board meeting. We didn't originally have the 1750, and the reason we did it is because we looked at Kirkwood data specifically, and we did notice, some single family homes that were on the lower end of the spectrum, like significantly in terms of building square footage. And we did notice some condominiums that were on the extreme higher end, right? And so what we did here, again, to establish proportionality amongst land uses, we set this baseline of 1750 on solid data in terms of what is considered a single family home, generally speaking, in the state of California. And so a standard single family home in the state of California is 1,750 building square feet or greater. And so what we're saying here with establishing this 1,750 distinction point is essentially that if you're a single family home, but you're lower than 1,750, you're actually more similar to a condo in size and layout and all that. And if you're a condo and your building square footage is larger than the standard single family home, when it comes to the building component, you're actually more similar to a single family home. So we're not directly correlating it to building square footage. We're just simply looking at it from a land use perspective and saying, okay, to establish this proportionality, you on the condo side are more similar in SFR or, if you're a very small SFR, you are more similar to a condo.
Yeah,
And therefore-
I understand what you put in here. It's just, you could use the same logic to say a 3,500 square foot home is like two homes. Right? I mean, it's just odd. It's just odd. It's not odd. It's not logical to say square footage doesn't enter into benefit received. Before, it was the type of housing. It was condo versus single family home. Now it's square footage that's.
Well, it's still
There's a
condo and
distinction.
single family home. It's still condo and single family home. The only question becomes, in the cases where you're a very large condo, your assessment is more similar to a single family home. And in the cases of an SFR, if you're on the extreme small side, you're more similar to a condo. But we still have the single family home and the condo distinction in the assessment.
Yeah, but I mean, the same argument, you could say a 3,500 square foot home is more similar to two homes.
But I think, I think on the 3,500 building square foot home, it becomes arbitrary as far as what is two homes, right? So somebody could say a 4,000 square foot is the average, or 4,500. But here, what we're pointing at is, according to solid data in the state of California, a standard single family home is 1,750 square feet. And so we're adjusting the land use in accordance with that baseline here. And it's really simply to account for extreme outliers. I mean, the vast majority of your single family homes are above the 1,750 baseline. And then on the condo side, the same thing. The great majority are under the 1,750. I think the average is about 1,200 or so when it comes to condos. And I think on the SFR side, the average is like 2,500. So
Right.
for the
So what
most
you've
part,
done is created a range that's binary, not incremental, right? So instead of saying per square footage, it has an impact on benefit received, you're saying it's a binary decision. I'm not an expert in 218 assessments. That's why we hired you guys, but logically, it tracked better before than it does now for me. I mean, before you said your argument was condos are different than homes and square footage doesn't apply. Now you're saying square footage applies, but it doesn't apply linearly. So just seems like odd logic to me. And I won't drag this out if no one else agrees. So
yeah, it's the last thing. So we're making an adjustment in the way we're assigning land use, if you will. We're saying, but I understand what you're saying, board member. But I think that this implementing this accounts for extreme outliers, if you will. And what we're doing is making an adjustment in land use, but again, we're not making a direct correlation in building square feet. That's not the intent.
oh, that's what you're doing though. So it's anyway, is there any appeal process for outliers?
Yes, in what sense? Are you saying like if somebody? Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I think the properties in Kirkwood are more homogeneous than like Amador County, but when I attended the Amador County's 218 public hearings, things came up about commercial, and what went on was there'd be a commercial property with a big Walmart on it. Then there'd be a large piece of land with like a hot dog stand on it, and they were getting charged similar assessments. And so what they included in the 218 assessment was some sort of appeal process where if you were an outlier and you could show some justification on why you were different, you could go through that appeal process. Is that?
There is an appeal process. The way it's described in the engineer's report, it's really limited to appeal on the basis of the characteristics of your parcel. So as an example, we have the land component and the building component, right? And so a property owner could come to the district general manager and say, I just did a lot line adjustment, and my lot square footage isn't 10,000. It's 9,000. And you know, they would provide the supporting documentation to show that. Or if it's a building, same thing. You know, my building square footage isn't 1,500. It's or it's not 1,800. It's 1,500. And they would provide the supporting documentation on that. Then we would adjust the assessment. So the way the appeal process is drafted, it's appeal to based on your parcel characteristics, but it wouldn't affect how the methodology is being applied. So we would just adjust it based on whatever parameters are correct for your parcel, or deemed to be correct. Because as it sits today, everything is based on county assessor data. You know, county building square footage and lot area for the county assessor's office.
I had just a couple of questions similar on the square footage. So Bob, I'll get to you in just one second, but my questions are kind of following up on some of John's, or they're in the same spirit. But one was, you've said a couple of times that it's less than this, you know, this square footage and the greater square. Are you saying that it's the benefit received will now be similar? Like your belief and your professional opinion is that homes and condos less than 1,750 have the same benefit received, and homes greater than 1,750 square feet have the same benefit received. Is that what you are saying?
That's correct. So just to make sure I understood what
I'll just clarify is that you just said
Yeah.
that they're similar and that they are, but I want to like,
Correct.
I think our
Correct.
understanding, or my understanding of what we're trying to do here is make equal benefit received. Like
Exactly
this is a
right.
benefit assessment. And so
You're exactly.
I want to make sure that what you're saying professionally in your opinion is that homes less than 17,250, whether they're a condo or a single family residence, have the same benefit received or approximate benefit received as a home or a condo greater than 1,750. Is that what you are saying?
That's correct. Yes, that's correct.
Well, the exception of lot size.
Condos less than 1,750. Is that what you said, board member?
Condos less than 1,750 and homes less than 715 are assessed at the same rate, correct?
That's right. That's right.
And homes or condos greater than 1,750 are assessed at the same rate. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so what you're saying is that in your professional opinion, the benefit received by what their unit type is, condo or single family residence, depending on that square footage line, that's a good, you know, obviously not perfect, but reasonable assessment of benefit received. Is that your professional recommendation?
Correct. Yeah,
Okay.
That's correct. Based on the circumstances in Kirkwood, and what we're looking at is fire risk, right? Protection of property.
Sure.
And things like that. So yeah, I
Great.
agree with that.
And then my second question was, I think you touched on it here a second, was orders of magnitude, what number, like how many are we talking are going to get the exemption or like the exception, if you would, from what they would be allocated in some ways of like, you know, how many are
Big condos and little houses.
right? Yeah. Like what, like, is it, you said out there, you called them the outliers. So how many are we talking about that would get this different, like orders of magnitude? I don't know if you have the numbers in front of you, but like orders of magnitude, what are we talking about?
Sure. And I think Brandon is online and can back me up on this, but I think on the single family side, it's about 50. Is that right, Brandon? For single family homes?
That's
Yeah.
correct. 50 single families were applied as a condominium, so they had less than 1,750 building square feet, and then it was around 75 on the other side, that condos that were larger than 1,750.
And then out of just total number, like what's the denominator, I guess, of this then?
Big number.
Yeah. What's the total number of residential properties, Brandon?
880.
So
or
I
something.
believe it's 260 single family homes and around 300 condominiums.
That's a big percentage.
So a quarter of the homes and quarter-ish of of condos, roughly. Okay, Bob?
Thanks. My question was on the residential EDUs. Can you remind me that I believe it was 0.7 for a condo? Is that correct?
0.75.
0.75. And you said there's one for employee housing.
That's right.
What would that be?
It's 1/3, so 0.33.
Okay,
And
is
per-
that, is
per
that
unit.
new? Or just remind, I'm sorry, is that new or is that also in the January report?
Is the employee housing that
Yeah.
is that's new. That's new.
Okay,
But because what came to light from that time is that there's mixed use housing, the mixed use properties within the district, and so we needed to account for the employee housing because previously it was all treated as commercial, and so that's why we needed to incorporate the employee housing aspect of it. Is the mixed use aspect of those properties.
okay. And what is the formula for the square footage for the property size between residential and commercial? What determined that formula?
Sure. So you're talking about the proportionality on the building component?
No, the square footage component.
The 2.3 factor, Ed.
Oh, the 2.3 intensity factor?
No, the intensity factor, I understand. So that's applied to both the property size and the building?
That's right.
Oh, okay, thank you. That's what I needed to know. Thanks, John. Those are my questions.
Do you have any questions?
No.
Okay, so Eric, just to remind us on where we are at this point in terms of conversation and what we would need to do, and I guess we can talk more, John, about whether we want to recommend as written or something else.
The next step would be for them, based on this, to complete the draft assessment engineer's report, which would then be reviewed by district council for legality. And then once that's done, it'd be presented to the board, which should be next month.
And so at this point, we need a consensus on that. This would be the way to go forward for the engineering report. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So do we want to reopen public comments? I see a hand up, but is anyone?
I mean, it's up to you.
Board, I see a couple of hands up from the community. Do you guys want to reopen public comment, or do you want to give direction and move forward?
Sure, let's public comment.
Go ahead, public. We'll reopen public comment. I'll give folks 3 minutes if you haven't spoken before. If you have spoken before, we'll give you 30 seconds. Go ahead.
Jeff Brown, Edinburgh County Supervisor. The only thing I wanted to put into this portion of it is AFPD had done an assessment, 218 assessment at the same time. The one thing that kind of falls off the end is actually counting the ballots. Who do you want to count the ballots? Because the election office in Amador County, and I don't think it'll do it in Alpine County either, that will actually count them. We actually got the Women's League of Voters to count the ballots for us. So just something for the foresight.
Thank you.
I think would Eric, would Ed do that, or would?
I believe that was included in the scope of
okay.
fee. Yes.
Thank you.
Jack.
We got another comment in the room here. Go ahead.
Sorry, Jack.
3 minutes.
Yeah, Howard Hoffman. I'm over on Yarrow within KMA. And I actually sent a letter to the board members kind of late, so it would be in next month's packet. First of all, John Schroeder, I'd like to thank you for trying to apply some logic here. We have an existing assessment based on square footage. And this overly complex system where we add the lot size, it's only 9% of the total assessment, both for commercial and residential. So we already have the data for doing an assessment based on square footage. So I have no idea why we want to incorporate this additional factor, which ends up being a relatively small amount of the total. And I say just go straight square footage. And the letter that I sent is signed also by Larry Parker and Bruce Odelberg, 2 members of KMA. And I'm sorry that it's just KMA. I didn't have really an opportunity to distribute it more widely in the community. But I think if the board wants to, or the district wants to have an expanded fire protection, if you want to get votes, I think the fairest way to do it is going to be simple square footage.
Thanks. Thank you, Howard. Next, Jack.
You just need to unmute yourself.
Hi, this is Jack Rosnati from Lost Cabin. Just a quick question on the assessment formula for condominiums. How is the lot size determined for a condominium in a condominium development?
That's a great question. It's based on common area. So common area or, parking lot area associated with the condo complex. Each condo would get its share of that, of the underlying land, let's just say, associated with the condo complex, based on a pro rata share based on building square footage of each condo.
Just the common area or inclusive of the area underneath the actual condominium itself?
The land component would be based on the underlying area of that the condo complex sits on. Each condo would get its share of the underlying land area.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. All right,
John wants to talk again.
John, you got 30 seconds, please.
Sure. I'm sorry. My previous question was answered. Never mind.
Okay. Thank you. That was less than 30 seconds. We appreciate it. Okay. So we'll close the public comment. I see no other comments. Bob, you have your hand up. So let's go to board discussion.
Well, I would just like Ed to explain that the current assessment we do is no longer legal because of changes in California law. That's my understanding. So we don't have an option to do square footage under California law. That's my understanding. Ed, can you either confirm or correct me?
Thank you, Mr. Epstein. So the current assessment was established before Prop 218 went into effect. So, all the laws behind general benefit, special benefit, proportionality, they're not nearly as stringent when the assessment was created versus now. So you're absolutely correct, Mr. Epstein. The intent here is to comply with Prop 218. So that's why we've taken the approach that we've taken here.
Thank you.
Okay. So obviously people have asked questions about the square footage here. John, you've brought this up. We've given the comments and conversations here. I mean, we have to move forward with a recommendation here. Are we comfortable, given the public comments and the feedback from our consultant, that this is the right approach, or are there other things that we would want to give them feedback on here?
Yeah, I mean, my comments about square footage wasn't to violate 218. It was I was given an argument in January that condos received different benefit received than homes, and it didn't matter how big they were. And so I went, well, okay. I watched the Amador County 218, and there was a lot of illogical stuff in that too. It's kind of an illogical process. Like in Amador County, if you live further from a fire station, you receive less benefits, so you're taxed less. And that's that's totally opposite of what I would have expected, because it's cost more to drive out there, right? You got fuel costs, labor costs, all that. So there's a lot of things in 218s that are head scratchers. I just found the switch from houses and condos have a distinct benefit received, and now it's based on square footage, what they receive, that doesn't track for me. Right. And then is there additional cost in carrying this forward further? Like, what are we voting on?
Yeah,
No, I mean, the draft engineer's assessment report, we've seen a draft, Josh has seen a draft. We put it on pause until this meeting which addressed these changes. So I don't imagine there's a lot of cost left except for finishing the assessment report and then ultimately balloting, and
Josh will charge, right? Or attorney.
Josh will charge. Yes.
So given where we are with public sentiment, do we want to incur more cost on this right now? This is my question.
well, it's a good question. I think there are a couple of ways of looking at that. One is, if you look at step change costs, I think, as Eric said, there's not a significant step change between now and April, right? I mean, that's it's incremental, of having Josh review this and whatnot, to finish out this process. And if we finish out this process, we would have something that we have an engineering report that I think when we talked earlier, we would say we wouldn't approve it because it's, we want to make sure that if 6 months from now there were small changes or whatever we needed to make, we can make them, but we could have something in hand that if sentiment were such that we wanted to then make the next big step change cost, which would be going out to a ballot, we would be, primed and ready to do that. And so I think that's the trade-off from a dollars perspective that we would have right now is spending, a little bit more money to get this wrapped and then holding on to it to the point which, as we discussed in other aspects of community aspects of it, of community forums, and we've done 2 of, we can do focus groups and things like that to then see if there's sentiment that is supportive to go out for a vote. So that's how I look at it.
Yeah, the other way to describe step change cost is to make decisions based on sunk cost, which there's usually good arguments against, right?
Yeah,
Like,
sure.
because we spent so much, we should spend more.
Sure. I'm not saying, certainly not making an argument that we've sunk a cost and therefore we should see it through. I'm saying that if we stopped today, we would have, something that's partially done, I guess, and we haven't really taken to completion. We just pick it up at some later point. And we would have to, we pick it up from that point, or we don't. I'm open to feedback on that, but
To put it in perspective, and Ed, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the total Francisco and Associates contract was just under 40,000. We're probably 3/4 of the way through that. So we're talking about and that would include the balloting portion. And then Josh's time based on his billing is probably, there's been a lot of questions asked by the board that Josh has been looking into. So that's, going to be 5,000 to 10,000, I'm imagining. And some of that's already sunk too. We just haven't got the bill on some of those sunk ones from Barkowitz, Chronic, and Shanahan yet. But that's the magnitude of the decision, I guess, in a $14 million budget.
Bob, do you have any, it's your hand up? What are your thoughts?
Yes, it is up. So I like to think of projects in terms of milestones and completing something. I view this complete when we have a complete plan and every homeowner can see what it costs and every homeowner can provide feedback, which I think we can do prior to doing a formal vote. So I'd very much like to have everyone in our district know what it would cost to provide a reliable fire and emergency services and I think completing that is well worth we're almost there. I think it's well worth getting that feedback.
Yeah. So your proposal is that we would complete this, have it reviewed by legal, and then do our own mock ballot?
Yeah, I don't know if that's what we're going to discuss next,
What's that?
or whether we're discussing it now.
That's on agenda item 9B, I would say, John, because those are 2 different things. Having this in hand and what we do from a community outreach, whether it's a mock ballot, whether it's a focus group or whatever, is I think that is a different process as to whether or not we finish the engineering assessment, engineering report.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. For whatever we do next, I would like to have this completed as a starting point so we can, we can speak in terms of actual cost per property.
Right. Peter, do you have any thoughts?
I think the sooner we get it completed and present it to the community, the better.
Okay. Thank you. John, thoughts? Anything else you want to add?
Well, I think adding the binary decision on square footage was odd. So that's just regarding the apportionment.
Sure.
I think saying we need to get this done, but we can't discuss what we're going to do with it is a good board protocol, but
I'm saying we're going to discuss what we're going to do with it is the next agenda item is more what I wasn't saying can't discuss it. I'm just saying that that's the next agenda item.
Because that's what I don't want to charge forward and incur more costs on something that's not going to pass.
Okay.
And can we, of commercial, it's 40% commercial. Can we say what the composition of that is? Or is that confidential? Who's the biggest?
Who's the biggest of the commercial?
Yeah, and what's the
Well,
percentage?
I'm pretty sure everybody could guess that answer of who the biggest is. I haven't seen it since it was updated, but the last one I saw available was around 28% of that 40. And then Chuck Cobb et al. Made up another chunk of it, and then KCA was a tiny portion.
So based on
And 7,800 was another tiny portion.
the Cobb group comments and that probably 40% in the
I think that'd be a logical conclusion.
in the negative direction. Yeah. All right, so we're not voting on anything. What are we doing?
I mean, I think from the perspective of,
You could take a vote if you want to take a vote.
Yeah.
Whether we push forward,
I'm not
that's
pushing
your
for vote.
discretion as the president or
I understand.
make a motion to of something.
Well, I mean, so I guess there are two things. One is on its own, there is this methodology that we are trying to decide on for our community. Like, is this the right methodology? And if we were to agree on this is an acceptable methodology for our community, then it would be a matter of, do we want to spend the incremental cost of potentially having this come to a report that we have in hand that we could use for a vote if we were to go to that position. And I understand what you're saying, John, is that potentially your opinion on that was dependent on whether you think that vote could pass. Is that right?
Yeah, you're right. We've got a big budget, and so another $10,000 or something is not gonna be all that material, but I don't like incurring costs on things for projects that we don't think are gonna succeed, and this one pretty clearly is challenged, right? So I think what Bob's arguing is it's a tool to try to put more visibility on it that might change voter sentiment. Is that what you mean, Bob?
That is exactly what I mean. So at least it's a complete thing that we can discuss. And there's the question of what's the total amount of money assigned to it, and various options on that can be discussed, although, that's another topic. But this is saying if we are going to have a higher fire assessment fee, I don't know how to have a fire department without that. If we're going to have a fire assessment fee, this is what's set, this is what's legal and proportionally fair based on the law and based on professional opinion.
Yeah,
And
and the 1750 isn't gonna material change things anyway. I mean, I think it was an odd modification, but it isn't really gonna materially change the outcome.
Right.
Well, I have the impression that in terms of the benefit received being carefully analyzed, that's something that needs to be added. That's what I'm hearing.
Right. That's why I pushed Ed to confirm that this isn't just a random thing. This is confirming that the benefit received is now more correctly apportioned. That's his professional opinion.
That's his opinion.
That's his professional opinion, and that is true. And then we hired him for a professional opinion. Right.
I'm not a 218 assessment professional.
Right.
It's just it's an odd string of logic.
I understand what you're saying entirely. I will say that my perspective on this is that at Measure E, if we go back to the process that we started a couple of years ago, part of the feedback that we received was, one, they did not know how much things were going to cost total, and then how much you individually could cost. Those were two of the main pieces of feedback that we received. And I think I err more towards Bob in saying, by finishing this, we will have said, this is we have answered one of the questions that we were asked to do, at least what I interpreted as what we were asked to do from the Measure E process and the feedback that we got. And so finalizing this is taking that to say that we have done the thing that the community has asked us to do. That's my opinion. That's how I see this. It's not I think we set on this to spend money to figure out the answer to that question. And I would like to say that we have answered this question, give the community the ability to log in to their account and say, given a number, which, again, we can talk about as, part of another conversation is what that number looks like, whether it's 1.2 or something smaller. If we were to allocate more property taxes, they could log in and see at least what would be expected of them. And we can have the conversation and say, here's your number. So that's kind of my prerogative on it.
I concur with that.
Bob, John?
I'd like to move that we request the completion of the engineer's report.
As stated with the modifications here, or is that? in this
Yes,
slide?
as presented.
So Bob, motion to do that. Is there a second to do that?
And the cost for doing that is there a cap on that or?
I mean, the contract is capped. So it's a time and materials not to exceed contract.
And then there's legal.
And then there's legal, which is not time and materials not to exceed. It's our attorney.
It's hourly, yeah.
Yeah, they bill in 15
Cha-ching.
minute increments. So, yeah, so there'll be some additional cost from Francisco and Associates.
So not to exceed 10,000, can we add that? Something like that?
The problem is the board has asked so much of district council already that he's been working on for 2 months from various questions that come from this board.
But that's not related to this reviewing the engineering
Oh, you
report.
just wanna,
Like,
you want
reviewing
to
the
say
engineering
no more
report.
than 10,000 from Josh to review the engineer's report? I
just would like to put some sort of limit on how much
I don't-
we're gonna spend. on
yeah,
it.
I think if you put that limit on there, I don't think we would exceed it in any way, shape or form, just for the specific review of the report.
Okay.
Yeah, it's gonna
Bob, you all
probably
right
take
with
him
that?
8 hours.
I'm fine accepting that modification.
Okay, so Bob, you restate your motion, please, so that we can have clarity on that, please.
I'm moving that we request the completion of the engineering report by the next board meeting and have a legal review not to exceed $10,000.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. Is there any more discussion? Okay, roll call vote, Peter.
Doug,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Bob,
Aye.
Peter, I.
All right, thank you. And I'll say thank you to our Ed and team there. We appreciate you taking the feedback from the community and the adjustments that you made, and I think it reflects the feedback that we received last time. And I appreciate all the work you've done and your professional recommendations on this. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Have a great afternoon and a great weekend.
Thanks, Ed.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brandon.
Okay, let's move on to agenda item 9B. Before we get into this, I want to acknowledge that there was one written comment in the board packet, and then Howard actually alluded to a written comment that came in about 45 minutes, I think, before the meeting started. So there are some written comments here, so take that into consideration here. But this is the agenda item is on community outreach, and I want to start by just saying that since the last board meeting, Rick and I hosted the second community forum that we've hosted this year. It was on Thursday, February 20th, 2025. We had about 60 members of the community attend, so it was really great to see a lot of people coming out for that. And thank you for taking your time in your evening to be there and ask lots of great questions. At that meeting, we presented the findings that Ed and team had presented at the January board meeting, the February board meeting. And then we answered a lot of FAQs that we had prepared slides for so that we can answer a lot of the questions that the community has been asking. And that we're really grateful to, after that session, grateful to Ricky Newberry, the general manager of Kirkwood Mountain Resort, to present an overview of KMR's engagement with the community to date, gave his perspective on the KVFD, community's needs, and suggestions on next steps. So there were, one thing that I personally took away from that meeting was that there were a lot of questions and comments made about property taxes, transient occupancy tax, or TOT, as you might hear it referred to. And so since that meeting, I've had many conversations with Jeff Brown, the county supervisor that represents us from Amador County, as well as Terry Woodrow, who is not here in person today because she is sick, but she has been really helpful in having conversations with as well. But I invited both of them to be able to speak today and answer questions from the community about property taxes, TOT, how they're used, and things like that. And so I want to start this session and invite Jeff up to the podium maybe and give a couple of words. Terry, I know, has been traveling and is very sick, so I know she's on the phone. I think I saw her name, but I don't know if she's going to be ready to present anything or answer questions today. But Jeff, I'll give you the floor to you to get started, please.
Okay, may I hand something to the board?
You absolutely may. Thank you. And Bob, we'll get you a copy of this via email, hopefully. Thanks, Bob.
Thanks. You scan it to Bob, Joe. Thanks, Jeff. Excellent.
So the chair asked me, I'm Jeff Brown, Amador County Supervisor. The chair asked me, about property taxes. So, and of course, this has been in just the past week, so it's been a a buzzsaw trying to find information. The county doesn't have Kirkwood specific. You know, they go by, of course, all your APN numbers and everything else. So what I was able to do, what I handed out, all these are all the APN number with Kirkwood as the city. So of course that's Silver, that's Kirkwood Lake, you know, so that's all this. So if you go, not everybody has it, but you go in the very back end of this, it's all simple math. It's nothing, don't get your accountants looking at it and stuff. So it's all just simple math. So for this area, we receive in property taxes $1.5 million. So the school district of that 1.5 million gets 943,000 right off the top. That is not something that the county has discretion on. That is state law that's required. I had some people ask me, well, you're not providing service. Well, Lowe's pays the same sales tax, property tax. They don't receive service for a school district from Lowe's or Safeway or any other business in that aspect. The county then receives 578,000. Your residents, under your resolution that's renewed each year, and you might want to audit that because there's supposedly some people are not paying your required amount. I'm not naming names. You guys are in your amount is paying 226,000. Then there's a school bond of from 2002 that you're also paying into. So for the area for this last year of TOT taxes is $21,940 for Amador. This is just Amador, you know, an area. But this also includes, that TOT tax also includes TOT tax out of Kit Carson. So that's also part of that because I couldn't break it apart.
Jeff, just to go back to the, so the 226 that's on the Amador County paid to, that's the CFD, that's not the property taxes formula.
No,
That's the
that is-
CFD.
That's your CFD charges
And
that you annually.
Right. And Eric, some
Coordinate.
customers are expected not to be having that too, right? Because that was an
That's true.
optional thing. So I don't think it's a issue if some people pay it or not, because they could have
When
opted.
The district was formed, it was optional to, much like Amador Water did. If you bought in, you got a lower connection fee. If you didn't buy in, you got the higher connection fee. So we have two sets of connection
Okay.
fees. So I know who's not paying. I
Well,
know it very well, but I also know that they'll be paying the higher connection fee later on if they were connected.
And so out of that, so that those two line items of the CFD and the bond, that is taken out as just straight, like that's just, those aren't, that's not the property tax coming back to us. That's just passed through.
That's just passed through that we charge on your behalf.
Right.
Yes.
That you have an annual resolution or a resolution on hand that you're running.
Right. And then, so you're saying that out of the, so we are not, in your understanding, pre-ERAF, then we are.
I've talked to all my county people and they're saying that there's nothing on file that you're exempt from the school district required.
Talked with former county auditor Joe Lowe, and we were pre-ERAF when it was originally set up. So Tacey may want to talk to Joe because he's the one who set it up, and Kirkpatrick was originally.
That's out of Alpine County?
No, this is Amador County. Joe Lowe, your former county auditor, and before him, John Kirkpatrick. So it was set up that way originally, but I'm sure it's just in the formula and it's still applied the way it was before because the percentages match the LAFCO formation document based on these numbers.
Right. And the LAFCO formation document formula for Amador County is 10% of $83.84, and then the 20% of
That we don't have documentation to either. We're still looking for that documentation. Because what you have is just at Alpine counties. I don't have any sign off from Amador County of our LAFCO, because that's the LAFCO that you're running with is just the LAFCO.
No, so what happened when we were formed, the counties agreed that Alpine LAFCO would have jurisdiction for all three counties. That was during the formation. So that's been true since.
Well, you still should have had the Amador chair sign off on it.
No, because Alpine was given jurisdiction. Amador and El Dorado relinquished it to Alpine. No matter which county of part of Kirkwood was. Yeah.
We're figuring this out. All right.
Because, you know,
Talk to TriTac, talk to Chuck, he'll know. Chuck knows and TriTac knows.
okay,
And so then of the 21,940 of TOT, that's what you collect in the greater Kirkwood area, let's say, right?
right,
Not just properties inside of Kirkwood. And currently, we do not get any of that coming back to us. Is that correct?
correct.
And then of the total dollars of the 1.5 million, if I'm remembering correctly, it's confusing because it was close to that same CFD. Like this, it was the CFD that's just the straight pass through for water. But if I remember correctly, it's about 230 that we get back.
That's
As
a 220, that's a 226. That's what you get back out of
That's
last year.
Yeah, that's different than the property taxes, Eric.
That is different than the property taxes. We get multiple checks. So we get a check twice a year from Amador County for the property taxes coming back under the LAFCO agreement. Under our formation document, which was also special legislation passed by the legislature, which binds Amador County. Then Terry will correct me on this. We get Melrose payments twice a year or once a year from each of the three counties that are in no way related to the property tax allocation agreement in our formation
Because
document.
the line, the 226 here is the Melrose. What I see, and then you put from Eric, what you sent before is 229 is what we got from Amador. So very close.
Yeah, that's the property taxes we got back
From
under
the LAFCO
under the
formula.
formation agreement.
Right.
Now, the only other revenue that the county receives is Prop 172 funds. And that's 596,000. And most of that goes to the sheriff's department, with 258 going to Amador Fire Protection. But 258 is all Amador County pays for Amador Fire Protection District.
That's interesting.
So I guess at a high level, and you do, so like, let's just say it this way. At the upper bound is 1.5 million from Kirkwood proper. We know that that's an upper bound because of, like you said, APNs of Kirkwood. So a number slightly smaller than that. I don't know. I won't even say a number, but it's a number slightly less than that, let's say, is the total collected from Kirkwood Valley.
Mhm.
And currently we're getting about $230,000 of that back. So
No,
Yes.
you're charging over and above that number for your you're incurring. So I've got a property tax. Yeah. So somebody on Sentinel Way gave me another, no. So their property tax is 13,490. Then added onto that is $161 on the school bund. And then added onto that is a direct charge, which we call, and it's $994. And that is what comes to Kirkwood proper.
That's the
but that's the CFD, that's the
Right.
Melrose, which is separate from the property taxes.
Right.
And so of the 1.5 that you have that you gave us here, is that 1.5 of just the property and improvements, or is that inclusive of, is it 1.5 minus CFD minus property bond? So that's independent of those.
Independent.
So then again, so out of 1.5, we get 230,000,
230,000 back, not including the CFD, which is strictly.
which is strictly a pass through.
Correct. So,
Okay.
yeah, you shouldn't count that because we took on indebtedness and it's slowly being paid back over 35 years. I'm misremembering, maybe Peter remembers, but, and so that, some people call it Melrose, that CFD is being collected by the respective three counties, who's just passing it back to us, which we then pass back to the bondholders through our consultant.
So we can ignore
consulting
the
group.
CFD, we should just ignore
Correct.
for the
Has nothing
purposes
to
of
do-
this conversation.
Has nothing to
Same
do
with the school
with the
district,
amount of property taxes that we get as part of our legislative formation.
So if I'm doing the math here right, it would be 230,000 out of 1.5 million is 15%. So 15% of the dollars that we send to the county come back to Kirkwood. Is that how you would
if your math is right, which I have no reason to doubt it. except
I'm
it's
using
not-
a
it's not-
calculator.
It's not
I'm
a
not even
word-
doing it in my head.
It's not a word problem. We've established that issue yesterday. Yes, I would agree with your statement.
Okay. Does that jive with how you would understand this?
To a point, yeah.
Okay. So,
I mean, what's interesting is that I had to go through 3 departments to get
Sure.
everybody to be on agreement with us, and everybody just knew a piece of the pie. Not everybody knew the whole pie. And that's the one thing, being a supervisor is one thing that's always interesting. There's no owner's manual. There's no owner's manual. I can just open up, go, oh, okay.
yes.
So it's always a education.
Yes.
And the bigger problem for you, quite frankly, is no one's still around from 85, 86.
Yeah.
I mean, I know them personally, and I talked to one of them last night, Joe Lowe, your former auditor, which was probably before you moved to the county, and John Kirkpatrick as well, but they were both county auditors and they both confirmed it. So I have faith that the formula in there is correct, because based on the formula and based on how much we get, the math adds.
Okay.
Yeah,
But the biggest thing is that there's just not a huge amount of money sitting there, you know, unless you can get the school district to say,
well, I think that's one of the things is that depending on how, I mean, this is the formula, like if you're saying 62% is coming out from formula, then you're right. But I would argue that if we are in fact pre-ERAF, then there is 85% of those dollars that is sitting there. So that's what
and it's above my pay scale.
Well, I think that's what we should clarify that, I think. Bob, you have your hand up, so let's maybe Bob, if you have any questions.
A very minor suggestion for those of us watching from afar, if you could close the screen sharing so we could see everybody, since there's nothing on there that's related to this topic. Thank you.
There you go. So, I guess that's one of the things that we need to clarify. The other thing that you and I talked about before was actually getting the 83, 84 tax base, because that is a key part of this formula. Because again, it is the way it's written in the LAFCO documents. It's a percentage of 83, 84 property tax value in Amador County and Alpine and El Dorado. It's similar formulas for all of them, but slightly different. And then it's a 20% above that value over time. So that's the formula. So I guess what I would say is the question that we are asked and you're asked is, how do we ask for more? If what we're saying is true, that we're pre-ERAF and out of 1.5, we're getting 15% of that back. Why 15%? Because I think people would argue that that's not as much as they would like to see coming back to Kirkwood. And what is the process in your mind of, can we ask for what is the process of request for more?
Well, that's kind of the other part of this equation is the process that we provide you service, which is our auditing department, which is our elections offices so that's what the rest of your property taxes are paying for.
Sure.
In the county. Yes, you don't get a whole bunch of sheriff up here, and he's the biggest cost in the county. Law enforcement for the county is 64% of our general fund budget. So that's always just the sheriff's office unto itself is $18 million. So that's just a huge number.
Yep.
And just for Supervisor Brown's edification, Amador does not provide any election service.
I'm sorry.
Amador does not provide election service. Alpine provides all election services in Kirkwood.
Well,
Again, through the agreement with the 3 counties as part of our
okay.
formation.
Well, they're registered in our county. I don't think that.
Sorry, our board elections are handled
Right.
by Alpine.
I'm talking general elections,
Oh,
and primary elections.
Oh,
Yeah.
All 60 of them.
So I guess, let me stop. I wanted the community to be able to ask questions of our Supervisor Brown. But I also want to see Terry, is she on there? And I know she was, when I talked to her yesterday, she was not sounding great. But Terry, did you want to say anything or pass and come back to another meeting?
She raised her hand just as I clicked all the way down to find her. She raised her hand and went to the top. You can unmute now, Terry.
And Terry is our supervisor in Alpine County.
Okay, let's see.
I can hear
We can hear you, Terry.
You're quiet, but I can hear you.
All right, sorry. I've been sick for 2 days with the flu. Otherwise I would be there. I really apologize for that. I have some numbers from our county, but I haven't shared them with you yet. Like a sheet to share with you because I wasn't given that authority yet. But if you go on our website for our mid-year adjustments, the county board meeting, we did have the tax apportionment to KMPUD on there as well as the other areas. And if you take out the Mello-Roos, which is 329,1191, which is for your infrastructure, we come up with 756,481.99 of the taxes from property taxes. And in that number also is the 47,254.87 that you were sent for TOT. So it's 756,481.99 that we're sending over. And then just to make it clear that out of this money and then the $230,000 that Amador County is sending you for property taxes, the KMPUD only allocates $280,000 for fire in their budget. So of the possible almost $1 million, you're only allotting for $280,000 for fire. So I just thought I'd make that clear. I think a lot of people think that we're not sending you very much money, but we are. And also, Alpine County is working on a alternate proposal, which has a different model, and the county's working on it right now. Our sheriff, I don't know if he's there, might have some comments on that, but we plan on meeting with staff, KMPUD staff next week, try to set up a meeting to go over that. It's a very different model and less expensive.
Sorry, model for our property taxes or for fire services?
No, for the fire services. I'm sorry.
Great, thank you for clarifying. Sheriff Minder, would you like to add anything? Thank you, Terry. And I'm glad to hear from you and glad to hear a little bit better than we spoke yesterday, it sounds, but thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Board, Sheriff Minder. So I oversee the fire department along with the sheriff's office. So I've been working with Rick and his department up here trying to come up with some kind of alternative to get better service for the community here. So we're currently working on looking at the numbers, putting numbers together now, and hopefully with some help out of the academy in Lake Tahoe, and maybe with Amador County, that we can start putting something together that was much more feasible, that both entities can afford. So that's kind of what we're doing now. So hopefully we'll have some numbers for you guys for the next time. Hopefully we'll be much further along and be able to then and give you more answers. Also working with Vale on, when Ricky talked at the board meeting of trying to get some of his guys more involved in the fire department. So we still got to lock that down with Vale to see if they're going to cooperate with us in order to help. So the community to staff it 24 hours, 7 days a week is kind of what we're hoping to do. So with a much easier cost on everybody, so including the county. So that's,
thanks, Sheriff.
Doug, you got any questions from anybody?
Bob, you have your hand up?
Yes, Sheriff, when you say much, I don't remember your exact words, but you're comparing it to something and saying it's more reasonable. What are you comparing it to?
The 1.5, that was more or less both counties were putting out $1.5 million to staff the fire department. So we're hoping to get way underneath that. That's what we're hoping to do. But it relies on a lot of the volunteers in order to do that. So hopefully we can manage that. So
thank you.
If you guys can stick around, and Terry, if you're still there, I'll open up to community questions. I see we have a hand up in the community. We'll start online and then we'll go to Howard next. Is that Sandy?
Yep, Sandy.
Yes. Hi, everyone. I have a question for Terry Woodrow. Can we get the total dollar amount of taxes that Kirkwood pays to Alpine? Like I heard Amador gets 1.5. What is the number that Alpine gets?
I thought I covered that.
I'm sorry. I
She's
missed
asking
it.
about the denominator, Terry. I don't think I heard it either. I was going to ask the same question. Was you
Oh,
sent us
I'm
back,
sorry.
what's the denominator of $700? Yeah.
Yeah, so if you take out the Mello-Roos of 329.11.91, the property taxes, including the I'm sorry, I don't have that. Sorry, I don't have that math right in front of me, but the TOT and the property taxes equal 756, 481.99. But the sorry, the TOT is 47, 254.87. So that has to you have to take that out of there. So it's I think it's around 705,000 around
Right,
there.
I think, yeah, I think what we're asking for, Terry, is, you know, if Jeff had said like 1.5 million is the total collected and we got 230,000 back. You're saying we're getting 750
Oh, so the
some
total
plus out of, what's the total collected? Is it
yeah, so the
$1 million?
total collected on the tax apportionments is 1,077,393.90. But you have to take out the Mello-Roos tax, which we collect, and that's 329.11.91. So if you take that out, and I don't know I mean, the Mello-Roos is for infrastructure. I'm not exactly sure what you're paying there, but
I think I think I'm still, someone else help me I think what Sandy was asking for is if you take all of the dollars that Alpine residents are paying into it, I imagine it has to be in the multiple millions of dollars. And then we're getting some 700 some thousand dollars back, as you said, take out the Mello-Roos or whatever. And it's you're sending back $1 million or whatever, but 750 some. What I think we're asking is, what is the dollars collected? Like, what's the denominator of dollars?
Just because I know what the LAFCO document says, we're 20% of 8384 and 20% any accrual. If we're getting about 700,000 back, taking out the Mello-Roos and taking out the TOT, let's just say 700,000 is what we're getting back. Divide that by 20% is 3.5 million.
3.5 million. So Sandy, that is your answer. So something like 3.5 million.
Is that correct, Terry?
Sandy, you have to give me a second here. I don't have all of my documents in front of me. I'm looking right now.
Thank you.
Can you give me a couple minutes on this?
Sure. Thanks,
Okay,
Terry.
thanks.
Howard, I think do you still have a question?
Yeah.
Could you just so that other people online can hear you, if you could just ask by the microphone, I appreciate it.
Yeah, so the question is for Supervisor Brown. It's my understanding that Alpine County gives us some fraction of the TOT, temporary occupancy tax. Pardon, Terry?
I think she's talking to someone. She's gonna need
It's my understanding we don't get any of that from Amador County. And it's also my understanding that Amador County is about to bump up the tax. So why is Alpine giving us and Amador isn't?
As I stated, we're only getting $21,000 total between you and Kit Carson. Most of that property, most of that is used for the Amador County tourism. That's where that money is going, advertising all our places. So it's actually coming back up here, but it's through advertising. That's who we're paying to advertise, and they're advertising, all around the United States.
Do you want to go back to Terry there?
Yes.
Thank you.
Sorry, Terry, I clicked over you.
Yeah. Okay, it's 3.5 million collected.
So the good news is that the formula is correct. Because confusingly, your formula is 20% of the $83.84 plus 20% of the increase. So it's just mathematically 20% of whatever we send it to you.
Right.
So okay, well, again, we get 20% of the dollars that come back from you, and we get 15% plus or minus from Amador. Is that, Eric, would you agree with that general math, given Mike math before was correct?
Yes, to clarify, Amador County is 10% of the 8384 tax base plus the differential
of 20%.
Differential from that time to current times 20%.
Right, and the blended value
And
today
the
was
blended value
50%.
happens to be 15%. It won't always be that.
Yes, yeah, I don't, yeah, you're correct. That's a better way of saying it. The effective return rate versus the actual or something like that.
So if we
Okay.
discuss this for enough years, it'll be more than 15%.
Exactly. Assuming property values go up. Yes, Bob.
Okay,
I
look
see one
forward
more
to
question
that.
from Sandy. We'll ask that question.
Hi, yeah, one more question for Terry. Does she have any advice to the community of Kirkwood and the board on moving forward with ways we could ask or legislate for more of the tax dollars that go to Alpine County?
You're still on.
Am I still on?
Yep, you're still on.
We can hear you.
Oh, sorry, I didn't know if I was still on. Well, I'll have to talk to staff on that. I don't have any advice right at the moment. I'll talk to our finance director and our CAO and see what the process would be.
Jeff, I would have the same question for you for Amador.
I can ask the question, but I can tell you our budget is really tight, so there's not a whole bunch of leeway. We're gonna be doing cuts this year, because of we assume that's coming down the pipeline. So that's it's gonna be a big hit. So.
Okay. Well, Bob, you have your hand up?
Well, just one clarification. So the percentage is dictated by law. So there's no I don't understand of any legal requirement that would change it. But I do remember that Eric and Terry had a lot of discussions about how to approach things. And I'm wondering if those resulted in anything. When I'd say Eric Rickard.
Eric Rickard or Eric Christensen?
Eric Rickard, I remember him spending quite a bit of time with Terry looking at options. I just like to confirm that happened.
That did. I was in some of those meetings, just like I was in the ones with you and Amador County Bob.
Right.
Those are quite some time ago. Terry, 4 years ago, roughly.
Yeah,
it was when he was.
It may have been 2000. It was a while ago, 2017 or 18, I think.
So I just want to clarify, since there's a perception that nothing has been done or not, you can always say not enough has been done, but a lot was discussed and there were no results that resulted in a significant change in the property tax allocation.
No, there wasn't. We did have a proposal for fire, but we were turned down. So.
Right.
Yeah.
And that
Thanks,
was,
Terry.
I think, 5 years ago or so, I think, right? Something like that. Anyway, thank you. Any other questions from the community on this? I would say what I said at the community forum as well. You're welcome to contact your representatives. And if you have more opinions for Terry and Jeff, I see Jeff nodding here and hopefully Terry agrees. We did post links to your contact information on the KMPUD website. We'll plan on sending that out in the links to your websites, to your representative websites and how to contact you as well in our newsletter next week. But I just want to say thank you to Jeff and Terry for being here, and not just today, because I know Terry and Jeff are also here at almost every meeting, usually in person. Sheriff Minder's here as well. We've had other representatives from Amador, Chief Withrow. So we really do appreciate you being here and part of the conversation. Hopefully we can find something useful here in the conversation. I'm looking forward to hearing the proposal coming from Eastern Alpine. So thank you for working on that. That's exciting to hear that. In terms of next steps, I guess there is what we had tentatively in terms of our roadmap talked about, outreach from the board members to doing focus groups and things like that. It seems like we might want to hold off on that a little bit because we might have a new proposal, an engineering report. What do people think, Eric and staff and board?
I mean, if we do get a different proposal and it's amenable to the board, it's just a plug and chug in the numbers for the apportionment. So that's not an issue.
Correct.
So, I mean, back to John's original point, well, maybe not original, one of his earlier points, one, staff would be recommending not only having it accessible to people to log in and look at it, because not everybody has activated their KMPD
Sure.
account, but also send out mock ballot with the numbers through SurveyMonkey, which we already have and paid for, which would just be staff time. There's no additional cost associated with that. So in my mind, that we were always slouching towards Gomorrah in doing that. And if I recall what Ed said correctly, and I think I do, basically the engineer's report has about a shelf life of a year.
Okay.
And so I would also remind you what else he said, that if we go forward and it fails, we are prohibited for a year from going forward again.
Great.
So there is some time for the board to consider this and to wait on any proposal from Alpine County. And I do see that Klaus is on the line too. So that is he's the basically what's his title, Tom? What's Klaus's title? Chief Accounting Officer. If it has CFO, he's their CFO. He's been very helpful since he came on board with Alpine County. So I'm sure he's working on his end of things too. So yeah.
Okay.
So I think the next step would be to get the draft engineer's report with the assessment. Then the board can decide
Right. And
what
maybe
the next steps are.
so let's go until March. Let's wait until April. Would be the next step at this point.
Yes.
Does the board concur? Is that okay with the board at this point? Given that we have some new information from Eastern Alpine and we have the engineering report to come forward. What would you like to do more? Bob, anything?
I just think, I agree with what Eric said. I'd just like to be prepared. So once we have the final percentage allocations, then we can do a communication where people see exactly what it would cost for
Agreed.
one proposal. I don't know if we'll have a second, but I'm encouraged. Let me say there were encouraging words there that I can't wait to hear more about.
Great. All right. Anything else on this agenda item? Board, we good?
Yeah.
Nods, yes. Okay, thumbs up. All right. Thank you again for the community and conversation. All of us really appreciate it. And again, thanks to our county representatives for being here and for the work. Let's move on to agenda item 9C. This is KMP Finances. Eric, page 16.
And I apologize. I don't know how this slipped in.
I saw that.
Yeah, so someone uploaded the wrong one to
Yep.
the server. So please disregard the special note. It actually has been corrected in the
Yes.
financials.
So this is the overview and budget variances for December. Any questions on the overview and budget variances for December?
There weren't a lot from finance either, John.
No, there's, the couple items that are gonna carry through all year that.
Yeah.
I think people are familiar with now.
Are there any specific questions on any of the specific funds?
I had a couple of questions and I apologize. I didn't get the chance to email these in advance, but I just noticed on the residential base rates.
Page, please. And which fund?
Water, I was gonna get there. Water on page. There, sorry, I have it written down as a question. It's just, I think it's page 24.
I'm getting there. I had to hide the attendees. It's hard to see over them.
I noticed that the base rates were down on residential by like 5% or so for year to date from budget. And I'm just wondering, I feel like base rates in general, I would have expected to be within a tighter margin, just because that's usually a pretty well-known value.
Yeah, don't forget that we also assumed growth in the budget that may or may not have occurred, which would have meant more connections.
Okay.
So that I would think that might account for some of it.
Okay, noted. Thank you. And then my next question was on electric, which I think was on page
I'm there, 27.
27.
Yes, sir.
Let me see, what was my question? I wrote it down. Residential variable is way down, it looked like. If I'm reading that correctly.
Residential what?
Usage
Oh,
revenue.
usage. Yeah, usage has been significantly down for residential, and commercial has been higher all year.
When I was looking at the usage charts later that Brandy would present, I guess I'm just eyeballing it, so I didn't look at like number of megawatt hours, but it is down relatively speaking.
Residential's down, commercial's up.
Right. Well, yeah, it's up 50% higher than budget.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's not expected because we just have less kilowatt hours.
There's less people coming to visit because there's been less snow. I think is really what it comes down to, whereas commercial doesn't really have a choice but to keep the lift spinning and their lights on in their various enterprises. So I think that's what's been going on with that.
Okay, and then my last one was on snow removal.
Mhm.
Am I reading this correctly that our operations and maintenance is doubled what we budgeted almost? It's 91% higher than budgeted.
Right, it's high
Yes.
due to the unexpected snow removal equipment repair.
Yeah, if you look on the
that-
original overview and variances, if you
Yeah.
read on that, it's right on there. But yes, it's a repair. It was mainly, Brandy will correct me, it was mainly repairs to the RPM and the loader were the two biggies that, as I recall.
Right, and then we're down on staff costs 25% the budget because of lower snow, generally speaking.
We've been able to use them in other
Correct.
departments.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Of course.
Moving down to the January preliminaries. Any questions?
Could you close the door?
No questions? Okay. Moving
Cash flow.
cash flow.
We're on track.
Any questions on the cash flow?
We will have a payment for RUS coming this month. We have not received the bill yet.
Right.
Which
It should be any time.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm watching for it.
All right.
And about how much, it would remind me how much.
That's we budgeted about 700,000 and that's
Right.
normal. We have no payoffs this go around, but we do have a payoff coming.
Is that September? Was that?
That was the last one. We don't have a payoff coming the rest of this fiscal year, but I think it is, yeah, I think you're right. I think
Because I
it's
think the
September
budget I
of
saw
next
was
fiscal
September
year.
and December next year.
And the budget
For-
assumptions,
risk-
we'll go over
Yep.
the budget assumption. I think it'll be in there. Actually, I know it's in there. Because I wrote it.
That was easy.
All right. Any
Thanks.
questions?
No.
Bob, do you have any questions? Okay, he's fine. So let's, thank you, Terry. Appreciate it. So that's 9C. We'll move on to 9D. This is a resolution 25-01 USDA Rust Certificate of Authority. Eric.
Yes, so as part of our loan covenants, with regards with Russ for the electric, this does not apply in any way to the wastewater treatment plant. So just to make that clear, we have to utilize their system and have authorized users, et cetera, et cetera. I'm the authorized administrator, and I'm the owner, so I can actually do everything. But what I can't do is add people without a board resolution. So with the turnover in staff, we need to promote Terry to a higher level of user that Tommy used to be and promote Amanda to Terry's old position of use. So this is a formulaic resolution from USDA that they require. And then the two forms on the back will need to be signed as well by both Doug as president and Peter as secretary. But this is we do this periodically as staff changes, so.
Any discussion?
Pretty straightforward.
Okay. I would accept a motion to approve this.
Yeah, Peter will move that we adopt resolution 2501.
Great. Is there a second?
Second.
Peter, roll call vote, please.
Okay. Doug,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Bob,
Aye.
Peter, aye.
All right. All in favor. Thank you.
Okay, could you make sure that those signatures happen before, in case we run to past 4:30, I'd like to get those done before you leave.
They're here and now I will sign them before
Thank you.
4:30.
Excellent.
Didn't want to sign them
Good job.
before
Thank
we
you, Terry.
did not want to sign them before the agenda item.
No, of course not. No.
Okay. Let's move on to agenda item 9E. This is the fiscal year 25-26 budget assumptions. Eric, please talk us through
Sure.
this.
So this has gone through finance. There were a couple comments that were addressed from finance. So just I'll go through any of the reds that aren't dates. Obviously, we change the dates every year. That should be relatively non-controversial. One thing I did add in, because there's been some disinformation just being spread in the community about what funds receive property taxes. So I went ahead and added it into the budget assumption. So it was very clear who does and who does not get it as of today. So that was added just for an informational piece. I think John had mentioned that he'd like to see that. So we added that in. So
Can I just make a recommendation and maybe like making a sub bullet I, and then that way it's just grouped and easier to read potentially.
oh, you mean just tab it out so they're all the same?
So like make receives property taxes, blah, 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 does not receive blah, 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 blah. That way it's organized a little bit easier for users to separate them in their mind. I know you love that comment, so I'm seeing you really excited about that comment.
I'm sure you want me to do a histogram to go along with it. So
Could you? That would be fantastic. I love histogram.
I will be happy to do that. for
Thank you.
Doug.
Thank you.
Well,
I appreciate-
happy's not the right word,
Yes.
but
No, I appreciate you adding in there. I think that is important for us to have that easily referenceable for folks.
yeah.
It's really helpful.
So this one, I'll just briefly mention on G&A allocations. Obviously, if we do go to contract fire services, there was assumptions included in that it would drop the G&A allocation of fire. So this presumes we still have fire as we currently do, but these would change and I would bring these back to the board if they needed to change. So just that one caveat. So there's not a logical inconsistency where I said one thing in one, 2.8 in one and 8.3 in the other. That is why. With regards, I went ahead and, just because it keeps coming up, I thought it'd be good to memorialize the CPI and our assumptions of what it is and where it is.
That really stuck, huh?
It really stung. It really stung. Yeah. Especially when I'm being chastised for something that's fictional. Such as Sacramento.
I gave him a hard time about it.
I appreciate it, John. Thank you. So anyway, I did put that in. I looked and I have a running tally of this particular CPI as well as it's also on the Bureau of Labor Statistics, but it's 3.5 over the last 5 years, which is why I chose 3.5. I realize everything's subject to change, but we have to make some base assumption. And since we use 5-year rolling averages for everything else we do in the budget, I use the same. Any questions on that? Or?
Can I make a comment that you're going to love?
No.
So I think it would
Well,
just
ask you to do it anyway.
I'm going to give you a comment that you're not going to love. Okay. Could you just maybe put that like as I love that you put this in here and memorialize it because it's really helpful. Could you just put a line item for 2 and just say, for this budget, we will assume a CPI of 3.5%, and then just each of the other items, because you reference it like 7 or 8 times throughout this.
Oh, you just put it
and
up
just put
under,
it under
I, you mean 5I, put it there? 5I2?
5I2.
Yes.
Just put that there, and then that way it's one place to replace instead of.
The only reason I'm going to push back on that, and it's not that I don't love the comment, because making my life simpler is good. So I appreciate you, Doug. Thank you. That what has happened in the past is sometimes we've seen different price fluctuations, especially propane and electric, because of things outside of CPI control. And so sometimes when we had the propane one, there's no one in the audience for me to talk to except for Jeff. So, but when we had the propane, we had propane at 8% one year. Just because of the variation in their goods, which is really not a CPI, but it's also where we stick it. I'm happy to move it, but then I lose the ability to be specific in case it won't change. But if the board wants you to put it in one spot and call it good, I'm happy to do so.
Well, I would argue that if you put it in one spot, everywhere it says CPI, you could just redline that in the next budget and say, we will not use CPI, we'll use 8% or something like that. We could just do that way.
Okay, fine with that. If the rest of the board's good with that. Yeah, okay. I just mentioned our hedge pricing. I got rid of all the other discussion about what happened a couple of years ago. Nothing really controversial there. We are doing a upcoming water and wastewater rate study. I should also note that propane will change. It should have the same note. So it doesn't, it will get the same note as determined by the forthcoming propane rate study, which I just started. So I will make that correction on 3.2 or subset 3.2. Here's our total property tax. We've been talking about property taxes quite a bit. So we budgeted 978. There was a question why such the big increase. Our budget assumption last year was 884, but our actual realized was 923. Hence why it's at 978. It doesn't match the 6%. The math doesn't work, but it's because the budget assumption was too low last time. So that's if anyone's wondering about that. That was a finance committee question as well. Talking RUS loans. So this goes to your point, Doug. So I do have September due at 1.4. The reason it doesn't reflect in the cash flow is because we're going to have to roll it. I will not have cash to pay this. So it's the board's decision ultimately, but if we don't have the cash, we don't have the cash. So I went ahead and made the assumption that we're going to have to roll it. Just because we don't have it. I think we might have it for the B8, but then we wouldn't have it for the B3. So we'll be talking about this in finance as we start getting closer and I start seeing what my electric reserves look like. As everyone knows, and Brandy will talk about in the ops report, so I don't want to talk about it too much. With the ground fault and the transformer, phase 3 of Loop Road, the old name it was called, is going to have to happen, and we're estimating 250 to 5, somewhere in that range. Just depending, we don't know what the market's going to be, but that's gonna be a cost that's gonna absolutely suck a lot of electric reserves. Right. So that's,
And that's all related to, I think capital planning and infrastructure. We did the capital, we did the master plan on this. This is all stuff that I would say is unexpected in some ways, right?
it's not unexpected.
it's just-
All of our direct berry was expected to fail and has been failing over time. This is the second time this has failed since I've been here, and that's only 8 years. So we had a backup line, now we don't. So there we are. So it's
Well, this was a transformer too, right?
and a transformer too, but again, Brandy will
Oh, yeah.
speak to it, but we think the direct berry caused the transformer issue. So anyway, so we may have to roll all 3 of these, but again, this will be finance bringing back to the board for the board's ultimate decision, but that's my anticipation. We might have to roll all 3.
And just help me to prepare me. Do you have to roll the entire amount, or could we
Yes.
pay a portion of it?
You have to roll the entire, well, we pay a portion every
Right.
quarter. But yeah, we'd have, the way they roll them, they roll the whole thing. So. Updated the wastewater treatment plant. Looks like we'll be issuing the notice of completion in fall. It might actually be August from the last schedule I saw, so that's nice. And so the big changes, there actually was only one this time, and we talked about this previously at the board. We're going to budget for 2 summer seasonal full-time staff. This has to do with the $600,000 for the wastewater cameraing and smoke testing. We think we can do it with two extra employees, and they can just run with it, and that's all they do all summer, and it'll cost us, with labor and benefits, cost us, $100,000, $150,000 range, which is a quarter of the cost. And I think that's the right thing to do. It delays the master plan, but also it saves us a lot of money. So I think that's preferable. Other than that, nothing really changed.
Okay. Any questions from the community?
Hold on. I gotta look at, pull them back up
I
again.
don't see any hands up.
Nope.
Any questions from the board?
Finance committee scrubbed through this and we're good with it.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Finance Committee. If there are no questions or comments, we need a motion to accept this, I imagine. So
Start building budget, yes.
Yep, I just have a motion to approve these assumptions so that we can start building the budget.
Motion to approve the budget assumptions.
Okay, is there a second?
Yeah, Dornberg, I'll second it.
All right, roll call vote, please, Peter.
Sharonda,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Epstein,
Aye.
Dornberg, aye.
All right, passes unanimously. Thank you, team, for putting this together. And I appreciate that you keep switching between first names and last names.
I know, I was just gonna say that.
Keeping me on my toes. It's good.
Go with nicknames.
Yeah, that's next.
I don't want that.
I want to know what they
I
are.
don't want to know what they are. I would rather not. Let's,
No,
woof. Okay,
yeah,
9F,
definitely.
solid waste rates. Eric, solid waste rates.
Doug's the
Don't, 9F,
Klutz, I think is what we call him. The Achilles, the knee.
page 46.
46, poor Doug.
Thank you.
But I'm glad he's recovering well and out of the boot. So this also went through finance. So just talking briefly about solid waste rates in our contract with ACES, which is now Republic, they have the opportunity to increase our rates if they experience a CPI larger than 5%, or when there's a cumulative CPI larger than 5%. They also are allowed to do a supplemental gas increase, which they have done in the past. They didn't. So you can see here, we did increase solid waste rates in 2022-23 because we had sufficient rates to absorb that small charge. And ACES, there were no, and then 23-24 CPI was applied to solid waste, again absorbed the increase from ACES. 24-25 they did not increase rates on us at all. And now Republic is doing the cumulative change. And I'm assuming this is the same for the county and the cities too. This is how it's in all the contracts. So it's 6%. So right now we have 75,000 in reserves in solid waste. We have no anticipated capital or new operational expenses anticipated. And so I don't see that we're going to need to increase rates for the foreseeable future. But again, solid waste is a contractual service we provide. So we don't, unlike the cities and counties, we don't have to go through a 218 process. So the board can just raise them as they see fit. So if there was something unforeseen, we could do that. But again, sufficient reserves, zero capital expenditures, and no operational expenses expected to change from our end at all.
All right. John, anything from finance to add?
No, we concur, and it's nice to not have to raise rates.
I agree. Any community comments or questions? I don't see any. Any board questions or comments? Okay, I would accept a motion to approve the solid waste rates.
Motion to approve solid waste rates.
All right, thank you, John. Is there a second?
Yeah, Dornbrook, I'll second that.
All right, roll call vote, please.
Yeah, Taranda,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Epstein,
Aye.
Dornbrook, aye.
All right, all in favor, thank you. All right, let's move on to agenda item 9G, performance reporting and aquifer levels. Randy. This is page 50, which is you're already on.
Did we have a propane outage?
We had Brady will talk about that in the ops report.
Ops report.
Yes, since she's
What
here.
is
she's-
the ops report?
No, not yet.
Performance reporting and aquifer levels.
We will tell you, but you wait.
I have to wait. I
Yes,
understand.
we want the suspense to
Well, I
build.
already relit them, so I didn't wait for that.
Made you wait once, and then we have to make you wait again, I guess. I'm sorry.
Well, what?
So I made you wait before too, so I'm
I
sorry.
know, it's like some sort of training or something.
All right, Brandy, go ahead, please.
Performance reporting, fairly straightforward. You'll notice that in all of the utilities here, we're seeing slightly below expected meter for the month of January. If you look at electric, we've got about a 10% system loss unidentified, bringing us to 11% for the year. Propane, 17% a positive loss, which offsets a 27% negative loss from last month. We're sitting at 7% overall year to date. Fully expect that to come back between the -5% and 5% by the end of the year. For water, we've got 12% loss for the month of January, bringing us to 17% year to date. I would like to see, and I'm expecting to see that come down a bit towards the end of the year. And then lastly, wastewater treatment for the month of January, we had 13% I&I, which is extra water getting into the system, which puts us at 15% year to date. And then, as you mentioned, Doug, we do have all of the regular charts in here that show on the bars themselves, the greenish blue color is commercial, metered, red is residential, and then your overlay line graph, that's your temperature. So those are all included for each utility, and we still have on water, our water leak that we'll continue to see for the next upcoming years.
That's I see a hand telling me I'm number one in that one graph.
It's a water leak. I should put a star up there too. Any questions on performance report for the month?
I think so.
That's all I have for that one.
Some of my propane
Except for
was an outage.
There's low pressure due to the vaporizers being offline when they circuit went down.
Okay, so it was an electric problem that caused the vaporizer.
So that some people have that problem throughout the public, which was in our notice to people to check their propane. So
Yeah, the pilots were out when I got there. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions from the community for Brandy? Any other board questions? Okay, thank you, Brandy. We'll move on to agenda item 9H, employee handbook update. General Manager Christensen.
Oh, good. It's me again. I was waiting to get back in the saddle here. So every year the state has many new laws that we have to incorporate more or less into our handbook. That is the bulk of the changes. So you'll notice that we deleted the new Parent Leave Act that was superseded by the state legislature, by the CFRA. So that's why that was deleted. But the CFRA essentially replaced it. Again, Crime Leave Victim Act, that was another new big state law we had to do. We had to put in there. And then you'll recall the Workplace Violence Prevention Plan that Rick put together. We just included reference to that as well with some of the highlights. It's not the whole plan, but some of the highlights. And then the board changes on the well-being benefit program. We added that. So probably just maybe I'll just stop there and give me a page number if you have any questions or suggestions. Or
I think you mentioned the employee benefit. Sorry, I was
well-being. I did.
Sorry, I was signing this real quickly.
That's
But
okay. Thank you.
because I looked at the clock and I was like, okay, I gotta sign this real quickly. But okay, thank you.
Yeah, the well-being,
Sure, we'll skip down to that.
Should we add a cap to that?
I capped it at the then current Kirkwood only. Is that what we capped it at? Kept it at the then, I'm scrolling. Yes, I can't.
Kirkwood, no blackout? Is that in there?
The Kirkwood only pass is,
No blackout?
there's no
Yes,
blank
the
account
Kirkwood only
pass, but
speed pass.
that is a type of pass that we.
Yeah, and that's what that was the most expensive of the passes we offered this year. I believe it was 523, Terry, was each one. 623?
Yeah, 624.
623, 624. So I capped it at the highest level of ski pass we provide to our employees. So as Vail increases their prices, which I'm sure they will do,
Next year.
we will just be tracking with that as the benefit we provide. So
They
they
just
will no
released their
longer
new
be
pass.
providing the discounted passes.
And they just released those rates too, I think yesterday, actually, or the other day. So
Yeah.
we'll see what that is.
And obviously, because we don't know where our seasonals are, we can't have people, well, we can now if this gets adopted, but our seasonals will not be able to buy early season passes, whereas our full-time employees could and put in for the benefit if they wanted to get the lower cost.
So this last year, the resort honored the seasonals, right?
They
To the
gave
early-
us the discount that was available to the general public for early purchase. They didn't give us the one they've given us for
Correct,
since
correct.
they took over.
Correct, but we could continue to ask for that for our seasonals as well, and if potential.
We could ask for that, sure.
Correct.
So that was the well-being benefit. And thank you, Doug, for providing me with the template for that.
You're welcome.
Any other questions on the handbook?
Okay, any questions from the community? Okay, any questions from board members? All right, I would accept a motion to adopt the edits to the handbook and as written, or I should say, as written with the updates. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve the handbook.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Yes.
This is Bob,
We'll
thought
give
I'd
Bob a
try to
chance
beat
to
you
second.
once, Peter. Yeah.
You can
And
have
just
this one,
want to
Bob.
say that the Personnel Committee reviewed this and recommend approval.
Thank you, Bob. I
Yes.
Forgot
I
to
did
mention
add
that.
the annually, as you'll see on the screen.
Yes,
as
yes,
well.
yes. Yes, thank you for that reminder, Bob, and thank you, Eric, for doing that change. Okay, I think we'll say Bob seconded.
Okay.
Is the roll call vote, please, Peter?
Doug,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Bob,
Aye.
Peter, I.
Okay, great. Thank you, everyone.
Back to first names.
All right, we're going to page 122 now, I believe,
I'm gonna trust you.
on 9I. This is real property negotiations and appraiser retention. So I wanted to start by saying that personnel did review this and came forward with this recommendation. I want to say thank you to Eric for considering this. As you read in the document here, we have been looking for, and the board authorized us to look for housing for families somewhere in the valley. And we have been looking for it. We've talked about it personnel a few times. Staff has been looking for it. We have not seen anything that fit our need. And Eric came forward as proposing an option for us to potentially have an option to give him a price to offer to buy his condo here in the valley that would be adequate and fitting the needs that we had authorized and recommended to the board previously. Thank you again, Eric. This is a potential significant benefit to the district to be able to have families living comfortably in the valley and working here for the district. I think is of utmost importance to myself and the personnel committee and to Eric to make sure that this happens in a way that everyone in the community would feel comfortable if it were to happen. And so this is why we're having a public agenda item on this. And this is why we want to make sure the community is aware that if this were to go through, this would be priced in a way that is fair and appropriate to both sides. And we're not doing anything that would just undermine the trust of our community and what we're doing. And so that's, I think, again, that is of utmost importance to Eric. And when we talked about it in personnel, this is really important that we do this the right way. So all of that said, the proposal that personnel came forward with was to hire an independent appraiser to determine the fair market value for Eric's condo. And we would come forward with that to the board for consideration and as, you know, to extend an offer for purchase at that price. And then if that were to happen, we would take the steps to go from there. And essentially at that point, offer that price to Eric, for which he could then decide to accept or reject. And then we go from there. So the action today is to decide or not whether you want to move forward with this. And again, the move forward would be to hire an independent appraiser for personnel to come forward with that and find someone to do this to determine the price at which we could offer. Is any questions on that?
What would be the qualifications of the appraiser?
It's a good question. I mean, I think certainly as independent, right, as we can be, so it does not someone that we are, you know, tied to as much as possible, right? In terms of qualifications, hopefully someone that's worked in Kirkwood before, I would think would be an important thing that we think of. You know, if you have ideas as to what we should be doing is what we would look for, then
Well, I'd probably trust an assessor more than a real estate agent.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been a long time since I bought my house here, but the real estate agents here thought all the properties in Kirkwood were worth $1 zillion. I mean, it was crazy. I mean, they showed me units for $1.5 million that ended up selling for $980. Things like that. And so they seem very
There are such things
aggressive.
as licensed and certified appraisers. I would recommend you use a licensed certified appraiser,
Exactly.
not a real estate agent.
Yeah.
Because I agree with John. They tend to inflate things. I'm sure if I went to them.
The Kirkwood, you'd make a lot of money.
At least in theory. No, but yeah, there is a
John,
license.
Yeah, I agree with that. And also a real estate agent, a possible benefit of this private transaction is it avoids the 6% real estate commission. So a real estate representative would not be completely objective.
Right. Somebody with more of like a county assessor background.
That's what I had initially thought of as potentially. So I was going to talk to our county friends here and see what those options would be. But yes, that was my general thought. And again, the real estate, we talked about it in the write-up here. One benefit is avoiding some of that real estate if we can have a private transaction as well. So good comment. Appreciate that. Any other questions from the community? Any concerns from the community with the board potentially acting in this way? Okay, I don't see any hands. Any other board questions or comments on this?
Would this property would be deed restricted then? How does, I mean, I'm unfamiliar with current status deed restriction.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, and CCNRs basically say that someone has to work. That has to be their primary place of work, but with telecommuting, that all those things have gone out the window, but it is there.
So by having one of our staff members occupy it, we're in compliance with deed restriction.
Good question. Yeah.
Which hasn't been, it's been kind of irregularly enforced.
It's never been enforced. But yes.
We would be in compliance. We need to make sure that
the district would be in
compliance with law.
Yeah.
Yes. Good.
It's not laws, to be clear. It's CCNRs, which are not law.
Compliance with regulations. CCNRs are in the stand for regulations. CC and whatever. We be in compliance with CCNRs. Any other questions? Okay. Does the board want to, accept a motion to have us authorize personnel to go forward to retain a licensed certified appraiser that's appropriately neutral and again, not avoiding real estate agent costs and fees to appraise Eric's condo? Is there a motion?
This is Bob. I'd like to move that we proceed with getting an appraisal.
Thank you, Bob. Is there a second?
And you're going to include the certified appraisal, whatever. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Okay, Doug?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
Peter, I.
All right, passes. Thank you. Thank you again, Eric. All right.
The nose of a studio, let me know. Because the kids are all in college, they don't come back anymore.
That's right. All right, let's move on to agenda item 9J. Before we get into this, I will acknowledge that we have a written comment that was in the packet from Ron Salviovo. And then we had a printed version of a comment in front of us as board from Robert Endy. So just to take those into consideration, of course, as we're talking about this topic. In terms of this topic, I'll hand it to Peter because at the last board meeting, we asked EOP to come forward with recommendations. So I will ask you to tell us about what you all discussed and your thoughts
Well,
on.
we didn't come to any consensus to make any recommendations at this point. It's pretty early on in the process. This is the decisions that we make going forward have a serious fiscal effect. And if you read the comments that we've received, it indicates that there's some concerns from certain members of the community. And also, I think that a very small percentage of the community actually knows about what's been going on. It's my primary focus right now in the next 2 months is that we're able to dig out the hydrants right now in the next 2 months, so that if there is some kind of an incident in KMA, Juniper Ridge, or Cornice Court, that we can respond in 10 minutes. That's the goal. We've only dug out 2 hydrants out of the 40 so far, and one of them I dug out just on my own out of curiosity to see how long it would take, and it took me an hour. Hopefully, if we had a couple of younger guys, they could do it quicker, but it's still there was like a solid 6 feet of snowpack from that. It's been a mild winter, but we had that one storm where we got 6 feet in 48 hours. And I think I really think it's important if we can at least dig them out once. That the initial dig out, I think, will make it much easier to do dig outs in the future. But I mean, to me, it's not acceptable to let the situation continue the way we have. And I spoke with Eric this week on it, and he's agreed that we can assign staff to do some digging out between storm cycles. If there is any time between storm cycles in March, you just don't know. And also, I would recommend that we track the hours that are spent and track the amount of snowfall that falls. So we have some kind of data in a couple months that we can use for a basis to see what's affordable. I mean, is it more affordable to dig out the hydrants, or is it more affordable to modify the risers that still exist? And would we benefit by trying to hire somebody in the future to dig out? Do we put up bollards rather than risers? So we can find them without damaging them, and that's a trade-off when if you use a backhoe on a hydrant that you can't see. How's that going to work without bollards to kind of guide you? And we definitely need better markings, in my opinion. Like, instead of just one piece of PVC, we have maybe 3. Because that was what I've been parking my car there for 40 years, and I thought I knew exactly where the hydrant was, and it still took me just to find it. Once I found it, then you got to elongate it so that you can use all the barrels. And because if you come down with a 4-inch hose, into a hole and then try to make that 90-degree bend, you got to have some lateral space to make it. Anyway, and also we've talked about promoting a adoption where people adopt a hydrant and try to dig it out. And I think they do that in Truckee. And I know unlike Truckee, we don't have that many full-time residents anymore, but I've seen people in the past in my neighborhood dig out the hydrants when they had risers on. I mean, so it's just how do we how do we get this done in an affordable manner going forward? And I think that sums it up.
Okay.
I've passed out
Yes.
maps to the board members so that you give them kind of an idea of how spread out and how many hydrants we have. The only thing that isn't in these is the commercial areas. This is all the residential areas.
Okay.
And I'm not sure who made the map or where I got it from. I think it was from Michael Sharp. Like, I don't know. If you're familiar with these maps, Rick?
Yes.
So you have access to them and everything.
Thank you, Peter. Bob, you have your hand up. Do you want anything from an EOP perspective, or did you want to have a general comment? Because if it's EOP, I would say let's hear it. If not, then I would say we'll go to our community comments and then have board conversation.
I also attended the EOP meeting, so I'd like to offer my perspective.
Sure.
And that is at the board meeting, because Rick had to leave for a fire, we didn't get a chance to hear from him. At EOP, we did hear from him, and he made a couple of points I thought that were very important that are worth repeating here, unless he's planning on doing that himself.
Go ahead, Bob.
Okay. So Rick made it clear that in the event of a fire in the current situation, he would dig out the hydrant. He would not use the riser at the top. He also pointed out that in many circumstances, the riser at the top actually causes a failure or a problem in accessing the hydrant and making the hydrant operational. So what we currently have is something that the fire department doesn't use and would dig it out no matter what. So the question has much more to do with how do we find the fire hydrants? Because right now the riser serves as a flag, if you will. What's a better design? And the other thing that was really important, one of the community members mentioned, is we don't supervise what hoses they use or anything else. We have a fire department. This is how they operate. We should respect that. So that was the other point that were made at the EOP.
Okay. Did you want to add anything, Rick, as general
No.
opening?
Just generally, that's a good summary. Thank you, Bob. And again, that's the goal here is to have a good working hydrant year round, not just in the winter. And I agree with Peter. We need to do a better job at trying to keep the hydrants clear of snow so they're accessible all the time. It is a challenge. It's always been a challenge. An hour on a hydrant, I appreciate you digging it, Peter, because I've dug a lot of hydrants, and you're right. Once you get one cleared, it seems to be easier the second or third time, unless you're in commercial where snow removal sometimes decides to use that as a place to put snow. Whole different story. But we are planning on creating better design standards to put in our design developer packets to, again, put markings behind the hydrant as well on both sides, and bollards in necessary places where vehicles may make contact with the hydrant. So in the chance we do have a backhoe or somebody trying to dig out the hydrant with equipment, we can do it a little bit more easily. But right now, currently, the riser hydrant assemblies, as Bob illustrated, operationally, it does not work. And I do appreciate the community's comments about, that could jeopardize our ISO ratings and this changes, it's abrupt. The reality is we've been talking about this for a long time within operations. And when I have the ISO
inspector come out and do the ISO rating for the valley. Every year, every 5 years, they scratch their head and go, what's with your hydrants? And then I have to explain why we have them. He's like, I've never seen this, or she, both of them, we've never seen this. I'm not sure I should penalize you for this, or I don't know. I'm like, we try to maintain them, but he's like, they're very unusual, but for the most part, they don't work for us. So that's why I'm pushing to have these removed and to do a better job with market moving forward.
All right, so thank you, Rick. I want to go to community comments here. And so I want to start with our written comments because we actually had some specific questions sent to us in those comments. So Rick and Eric, maybe I'll ask you to respond to these. I'll read them out. I'll summarize the first email that was in the packet, which is, I would like to suggest, rather than installing new extenders or even digging them out in the winter, KMPD purchase an over-the-snow tracked vehicle as a big water tank on it as reasonable to be used in any house or condo fire. And then there's some comments about the response time may be quicker and things like that. So I guess, do you want to talk about that concept of a over snow vehicle and what that would be?
If we were in Bear Valley and the roads were not plowed, then that would make a lot of sense. And in fact, they do have a piece of equipment that meets that description. For us here in Kirkwood, one, it would be an additional cost that we don't have, of course. And two, I'm not sure where I could actually use that device or that piece of equipment effectively. So but it's an interesting idea, but I just don't think it would be a good fit for Kirkwood.
Okay. And then I'm going to move to, that was the email from Ron Salviolo. And I'm going to move to Robert Endy's questions. Was there a plan approved by the board to make such a significant change to our firefighting infrastructure? Is it available to the public?
This was an operational decision.
Okay. And I'll say that he used the words snorkel in his, so I'll just read snorkel, but I think that means the risers and what you refer to as the risers here. So why are we cutting off the snorkels, which have been in place for 30 years, apparently doing the job?
Again, the snorkels have a tendency to fail and actually inhibit us to actually use the hydrants effectively, especially in the winter. And this winter, as an example, as Peter talked about, with the hot and cold temperatures that we received, it creates extra snowpack, which actually pushes on the hydrant frames and assemblies, which causes them to fail.
People came from outside the valley to help during the Caldor fire and could not open the T-handles without a pipe wrench. Why not have a pile of pipe wrenches available to hand out when there is an emergency? A very inexpensive alternative, as I understand it.
That certainly could be done. However, is that a pipe wrench for every hydrant? Is that maintenance, maintaining, keeping up with pipe wrenches? But more importantly, as I illustrated in the last board packet, as well as the emergency operation or engineering operations and planning committee meeting, when you use the pipe wrench on a hydrant riser assembly, you can only open the hydrant within a quarter turn essentially, versus doing a complete 360 of the hydrant. So it really, the hydrant riser assembly, even if there are some that are a little bit wider, that assembly gets in the way of the operator safely opening the hydrant.
Okay.
So.
Another very inexpensive alternative may be welding on the T-handle with longer wings, allowing the T-handle to be twisted open without the need for a pipe wrench.
As I've seen in the past, by adding additional pieces to the top of the T-handle, it'll create more surface area for Snow Creek to actually push that T-handle aside. And more importantly, in the summer, when contractors come to the valley to use our water essentially for construction work, we rent them a construction meter, they will forget or lose the pipe wrench that we provide. And then you have a contractor standing on top of that assembly trying to use the T-handle to open up the hydrant, which causes a risk and a liability to the district.
Okay. I hear there are concerns about the snorkels being installed on the smaller 2.5-inch outlets on the fire hydrants. Could a snorkel not be fitted with a 4-inch outlet rather than just be eliminated?
It certainly could, but then you'd have to bring in a bigger frame support assembly to hold that 4-inch in place.
As I understand it, KMPD's idea to have as I understand it, KMPD's idea is to have no snorkels and to require the fire hydrants to be shoveled out so they can be directly accessed. This would require shoveling out every time it snows, a lot of work. Who is supposed to do the work? Who is supposed to pay to have this work done? To my knowledge, nobody in my EMHOA has been consulted about this.
So hydrant maintenance is the responsibility for the wastewater department, as well as fire department members. And then we have in the past, and I think we're going to do in the future, put this in the newsletter for Adopt a Hydrant program similar to North Lake Tahoe.
My understanding is that when a house catches fire, the fire must be stopped within just a few minutes, 7 to 10 question mark to save it. If the fire hydrant is buried by a recent snowfall when a fire starts, how many minutes does it take to shovel out the fire hydrant? How fast, by contrast, can a T-handle equipped fire hydrants be in service since the digging out is unnecessary?
We're going to dig out the hydrant regardless. A 2.5 isn't going to stop a structure fire, residential fire. We're going to have to go for the 4.5. Spending time trying to ladder a snowbank, attach a 2.5, and then have to dig it out anyway, it's just causing unnecessary time. So regardless, we're going to have to go for that 4.5. And the 2.5 is not adequate for structure fire.
And then the last question is, what will the underwriters of our residential insurance policies do when they find out we have reduced our readiness to quickly respond to a structure fire?
We haven't reduced our readiness.
Thank you. Eric, I see that there are some hands up.
There are two.
Could you help us with
Sure.
those, please?
Larry, if you want to go first.
Okay, thank you, Rick, for thorough response. That covered most of my questions. And maybe I missed it. I missed the last EOP meeting. What is the current number of inoperable hydrants in the valley?
I don't have the exact number. I think it's 18 or 20 right now. Throughout the valley. Is it that much? We have a list. I just don't have it in front of me, Larry.
All right.
And therefore, not just for the riser assembly, there's other issues with some of the hydrants as well.
Yeah, I understand there were some tweaking of the threads and so forth. And I assume those are mostly in KMA, as those are the oldest and
No. There are challenges with the KMA hydrants because they are the oldest, but there are other issues with hydrants being hit by vehicles. For example, the one by the rec center is currently down for who knows what reason. We have to rebuild it. There's one in Meadowstone. So the KMA is the hydrant that can't be quickly replaced because they're welded fittings versus parts that you can swap and repair with. So the district does have a plan to slowly, through capital, replace hydrants on the west side, including this summer. I think we have two scheduled.
And is that a standard agenda item in the EOP or some meeting to monitor the numbers and that are inoperable and flag them?
It's not an agenda item, but I know Peter brings it up in every meeting.
Well, I really think to answer your question, I think that one of our priorities once winter is done this year is to do a survey of all the hydrants and just see what condition they're in, and that'll give us more information. And I just don't see solving this problem all at once. I think it needs to be done in affordable stages, and the hydrants that aren't working should be attended to first, out of service. I mean, because I can think of at least 3 on Fremont that have been out of service for 2 years. And then, the winter of 23 really hammered most of this destruction was done in the winter of 23. And we had such a short summer, we've gotten behind. And that's why I think let's take a deep breath and see what we can do in stages.
Well, are there homes out of range?
We actually have a pretty good hydrant system. And so if a hydrant's not in service, I can still I can still make it with the next hydrant down the street. The spacing's done, so if we lose one, we can still catch one from either side, typically. It's the dead ends that we might have an issue, and right now, as far as I know, there are no dead end hydrants that are inoperable.
Or
Fremont Court
adjacent.
Yes.
Fremont Court.
Yeah, that's a pretty short run right there.
Yeah.
I've got enough hose to get that from the hydrant you dug. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly.
The next public comment, please.
Leonard, if you want to unmute.
Yeah, this is Leonard Moore. we're on Fremont Court, and we're a dead end, and I went out and dug out the hydrant the other day, found it's out of service, and Peter was up digging the other one out. We feel pretty uncomfortable down there.
Okay.
I mean, do you have, I mean, you just said that you have service.
Again,
to that area?
I have ample enough large diameter hose to reach your home as well as your neighbor's homes from the hydrant that Peter dug as well as the next one down, so we can relay water as well. But it is actually on the list for repair this summer. That was the number one identified. And where's the number two, Brandy? You remember?
Top of Danford.
And then top of Danger is another one.
Good. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Okay. I think I heard maybe Rick, can you clarify the cost? Because I think you mentioned a couple times, but I think is there any new cost associated with taking the risers out? Is it in terms of digging in snow removal in the future or anything like that?
Not really. I mean, the labor cost of removal would be the same as trying to repair it. It's probably cheaper. And then the ongoing maintenance and snow removal, that's a cost that it has not changed.
Right.
It has not changed.
I'd argue there's more practical ways to repair it. Just cutting the 1 inch and a half channel that connects the T handle to the riser, and you could take a saw and we've done that in the past where you just cut that, take it into the shop, repair it, drill holes, and add a tab with it. That's like a washer, and we've done these before in the past when with our mechanics at the vehicle at our own vehicle shop. So I think there are alternatives to get us by economically, but to just do a one size fits all removal, I think is a bad idea. I really do.
Can you elaborate on why? Because I guess I'm hearing Rick say that operationally they do not find them to be useful right now, whether they're functional.
Well, that's why we do a survey and see which ones work or not, and also see if the hydrants that have had the risers removed, if they all of a sudden function better or not. I don't think we've done proper maintenance on them in recent years. And there are ways that economical ways that you can improve the T handle. You can drill holes in it, grease zerks, and so you can lubricate them with a grease gun. There are ways. I would just like to explore some of our options before we make any big moves. I just don't see the rush, because we have to prove that we can dig out 40 hydrants and not 200. I haven't seen any evidence that we can dig them out. If you can't dig out the hydrant, it's useless.
Sure. Okay.
Anyway, we've got a committee that's going to be meeting in 2 weeks, and we just keep that as an agenda item until summer comes and we can actually do some repairs and get a good picture of what our current situation is. I mean, I'm trying to give you a hint, and I think some of the worst hydrants are in the commercial areas where they get abused.
Abused in what way? Sorry.
By contractors.
Oh, I see what you mean. Sorry.
And by the Vale's snow removal. That's where most of them have gotten bent. Down there by Timber Ridge, that's one that's frequently shown with the bent T handle. That was done by blowing snow in the winter of 23, because it's pointing right towards the building. Where snow creep would be pointing towards the road. I mean, I think we just need to be logical about this and cautious. I mean, fact that most of them are still standing after 30 years is proof that we got our money out of them, but the cost of everything is gonna skyrocket. Steel.
But you said that, but yeah, but the costs are gonna skyrocket. What costs do you mean?
Well, one of the options is to put a 4-inch snorkel that's prefabricated. It's made out of aluminum and you can buy. That way you'd get your 4-inch up in the wintertime, you could get 4 inches on a house.
I guess what I want to understand, maybe Rick, you can answer this, is that regardless of the design, whether it's a 4-inch or something that's what I feel like I've heard you say, and tell me if I'm wrong, is that you do not want any apparatus around your hydrants, full stop, period. Like you don't want repair. You don't want a different design. You just want them fully removed. Is that because operationally your recommendation is that there is no snorkel apparatus, improved, fixed, modified, or anything else that you want to have? Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
And I disagree with that vehemently.
Okay, I hear that. But I mean,
it's not personal. It's just.
But let's let Bob have a comment then.
I recommend the interest of time that we let the EOP work on this. And if we can come up with a common recommendation, bring it back to the board.
That's what I concur with that. I mean, let's do some research.
So I think we've covered enough of it for today in the board meeting.
Yeah.
John, do you have any thoughts?
We're not gonna remove a lot in the next couple of weeks, right?
No.
Yeah, so it seems fine.
Okay. EOP, continue to discuss. All right. Move on to agenda item 10, major project updates.
Okay, so you'll notice that all of the two water lines that are completely blank, I've removed all the estimates on that. Brittany and Rick and I have seen the first draft of the water master plan. And their recommendations are different, have different timing. So I just removed those two until the master plan can get to EOP and then ultimately to the board for approval. And then I will update that. So if you're seeing water missing, that is intentional. Other than that, started on the propane rate study, or tried to start on it this week, and then I ran into 40-year-old policies that Peter probably approved. We haven't updated in 40 years. So I talked to Peter and we're gonna bring it back on that. And I'm also gonna have some that are gonna head finances way, and we'll see where the rest go. But anyway, so that propane rate study has started, and meeting with the wastewater consultant. Now that we have a tentative CIP from the water master plan from the consultant, I can meet with our rate consultant next week, next Tuesday, I believe, to go over that, and as well as the board's recommendations and decisions from last time for changes to the methodology or keeping it the same, whichever it was in the particular item we talked about. Other than that, I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Well, Eric, the master plan will probably not be finished at the end of this month, right? For propane?
For water?
For propane.
It was already finished.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We approved that at the last meeting, I believe.
Right. So we're talking about
but your
the
point
rate
is well
study.
taken on water. It will be probably finished by staff in terms of our internal review, but yes, it'll lag on into quarter two for EOP and the board.
Right. Okay.
But yes. You meant to say water. I interpreted correctly.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, any other questions on major projects? Anything from the community? Okay, let's move on to item 11, general manager's report.
And it sure seems like we've covered everything. The electric outage will be covered in the operations report. Continuing to attend the CARB fleet rules that will affect all state, county, special district, as well as drayage fleets for ports, various ports around the state. Continuing to track what that means for the district. As of now, with the US EPA rescinding the exemption for the state of California, it has lessened the teeth in the draft plan prepared by CARB staff. But I will say that the CARB staff's administrative draft that it had got has more or less been approved by the staff and now going to the CARB board will in no way affect the district. None of our fleet rises to the level currently of the current regulations. So even though we're small and have an exemption, we will not need it unless we changed something in our fleet. That doesn't mean we still won't continue to purchase EV or hybrids as we replace vehicles, but it just means we're no longer required to do so. And beyond that, I think that's probably the biggest. I think that's probably the biggest thing that's really been going on. It's not everything else we talked about.
I apologize if this is like way off base or not relevant, but I remember at some point, I think you mentioning a long time ago about like snow removal equipment needing to be electrified.
No, so there's an exemption that they've included. So we do not need to electrify our snow removal fleet. So that is one of the exemptions as well. As this also applies to our loaders because they are used for snow removal. And so they are exempt from other new, not related to electrification, but related to other CARB rules as well. So basically the entirety of our fleet is either on a low hour exemption in terms of heavy equipment or a snow removal exemption. And our trucks don't hit the gross vehicle weight rating that would trigger mandatory EV purchase.
Does that include tobacco?
Tobacco is a low hour use. So that exempts us there because we don't do more than 250 hours a year on the motor.
Because that's a pretty handy tool to have.
Oh yeah, and you'll see when we get to capital, we're going to need to replace it soon. So we'll get the only thing you can buy in California at that point is probably going to be a CARB 4. So which won't work very well up here with all the regen and all those things, but it is what we will have.
We won't have enough power.
Yeah, just it regens. I mean, if you look, this isn't analogous to us, but if you look at what happened to Caltrans, their CARB 4 equipment, they can't run stuff. They have to let it regen for 2 hours. They can run it for like an hour, and then it has to regen 2 hours. So their power is way down. To your point, power is significantly down. But that's part of the Caltrans one size fits all everywhere in the state is the same, and we're going to push this down regardless of how it works or not. So the local Caltrans guys are keeping the old stuff working as long as they can.
All right. Any community questions in the general manager's report? Any other board questions? All right. Move on to 12, an operations report.
Not much for operations. We kind of talked about a lot of stuff, but for snow removal, equipment wise, we're doing really well. There's one machine that's down. One of the trucks is down for can't quite remember, was it relays something? Anyway, got one machine that's going to be worked on. It's got to take the dash out to fix it. That's what I was told. It's the hydraulic pump for the front ram. It works, but if you use the control, sometimes it'll bleed out and it'll throw the box into the cab, which is not a good thing. So anyway, we're not using that, but we have plenty of staff to use the other equipment, and we do run a night shift during storm cycles, and you'll see that especially next week when we're expecting this storm of the century, according to Brandon.
Oh boy.
And for fire, for the month of February, there were 13 calls. That gives us up to 31 calls to date for February. Of the calls, there were 4 alarm calls, either for smoke or water alarms. 2 were caused by cooking, and they opened the hallway door and set the alarm off in the building. We had 5 clinic LZ calls, meaning that there's an event on the mountain and they need to call an aircraft in, helicopter. We come and stage and land the helicopter and assist. There were 5 of those. And then 3 motor vehicle accidents, with 2 of those being non-injured. For the on-call shift, glad to say there was only a couple PM shifts that were not covered for the month. Of course, those are always at the evening and on the weekends. That kind of covers it for fire. And probably the most important thing for operations was, of course, the power outage. And I'll just kind of give the highlights, and Brandy, please jump in here. So the outage occurred at 7:15 PM last Friday. By 7:20, the backup generators that we have at the powerhouse kicked on and actually provided power to the valley. Within 10 minutes, 2 district staff were at the powerhouse checking the powerhouse, which was amazing. And then staff continued to triage, troubleshoot what was going on with the power, what the fault might be, and it was a fault on the residential line. At that time, staff also called for additional staff to respond. So myself, Spencer Patterson, and then Steve Neff, John Campbell, and Vincent and Brandy were here. Am I missing something? And Derek Dornbrook all responded to assist with the outage. And then ultimately by 10:55, power was really restored to the residential current. And then by about 12 midnight, maybe between 12 and 1:15, we were able to isolate the ground fault that we discovered on the residential line here on the Loop Road fade going to the old vehicle maintenance shop, as was mentioned before, which also affected the transformer at the vehicle maintenance shop, which feeds the shop as well as Volcano. Brandy, you want to add anything to that?
Just really a thank you to all of our staff. We had 3 people from off mountain here within an hour and 2 more calling me, "Are you ready for me to come up?" It was a really good staff response. Rick mentioned that this fault was on the residential. Rick mentioned that the fault was on the residential circuit. And some of the things that we saw were the residential circuit runs down Loop Road. It powers our wastewater treatment plant and our propane vaporizers. So as soon as staff was able to determine this is likely a ground fault and it's on the residential circuit, it then becomes a concern of, can we restore power to those pieces of infrastructure so that we don't have low system propane pressure, which we did see Saturday night. And can we continue treating wastewater in the valley? So at that point, that was when we started calling in people to do snow removal at different pieces of equipment. I know it took longer than we really wanted it to, but overall, we were able to isolate it within 4 hours. We had residential backup. The only customers that were down were then Loop Road. And we were able to isolate the fault that night. So really good response from our staff. Our equipment worked as expected. And I would like to say that I think it's really great that the board is moving towards housing for more staff in the valley. As you have more people here, you're able to hit the ground running. New transformer, we need one for the lower shop and Volcano. They are operating on partial power right now. Likely this transformer was damaged because of the fault. Ground faults happen on direct bury cable because the insulation is old. This is all 50-plus-year-old cable that's been in the ground in less than ideal conditions. The insulation can crack, water can get in, it throws a fault through the whole system, and that is the point of connection for this wire. So not a typical happening, but also not very surprising that this happened. So new transformers on the way. Our staff's planning to receive that on Monday, get it installed, if at all possible, on Tuesday before the storm of the century, and get everybody back up and running.
Brandy, can you also comment on what we did your after action meeting that you had on Wednesday and lessons learned?
Sure thing. So we met with all operations staff on Wednesday just to go over the sequence of events. How could we have responded better? What can we do in the future to help in situations like that? And we got quite a few good comments from our staff, such as some additional ways to hook up generation, like a portable generator to the vaporizer propane system, potentially even at the wastewater treatment plant if that becomes necessary. Designating one of our staff for each of the utility departments to run point on that. So, Friday night, you have people doing snow removal, you have everyone focused on we must restore power to the wastewater treatment plant. That was really the focus of all staff. But in the future, when we have incidents like this, having a staff member who's going to be eyes on propane, eyes on water, just making sure that we're not so focused on one thing that we lose other utilities. So it was a good exercise for our staff. Like I say, I'm really grateful for everybody that showed up and everybody who contributed positively.
I have a question. Do we still have Old Betsy?
We do.
Can you
And
explain what Old Betsy is for people who don't know what Old Betsy is, Randy?
so Old Betsy is a Caterpillar generator that is housed in the wastewater treatment plant, and it is old, but it is potentially, we still have a permit for it. It is potentially functional in situations like this. It has not been tested in some time.
Could that be dedicated just to the propane evaporator?
With potentially,
Or not?
it's something that the propane vaporizers have a very small power draw. Probably a portable generator and a pigtail is the easiest way to do that. But potentially investigating whether that's a viable solution rather than a portable generator at the wastewater treatment plant. It's going to be something we look at.
Okay, just curious.
It's still there. It's still intact, and we still have a permit for it. But it was the original generator down at the wastewater treatment plant. So we
It's a Caterpillar.
It's a Caterpillar. It's an old one. So those typically run pretty good.
I just want to say thank you again. I know people were up all night working on this and, really appreciate the staff's efforts on this stuff. Certainly Kirkwood Mountain Resort was very wondering what was going on, and I appreciate communications with their staff. I know you were in direct contact with a lot of people, keeping them looped. They had a busy weekend, and they were able to open mostly normally. And, we know that they're operating with limited power right now, and appreciate everyone, the resort and everyone in the community as they worked through this, because certainly we understand not having power is not what you want, but we responded as quickly as we could, and I really appreciate staff's efforts on that. So
absolutely. And I'll second, my communication with Vail staff has been great. They've been very helpful, and everybody's working towards getting their power all the way back on.
great. Bob has a hand up. I don't know if I can.
Yeah, Brandy, I also want to thank you, Rick, Ed, Spencer, and Derek. I think that was a great response. The other lesson I think I noticed or learned is if this happened during the day, then we have staff members who can send out a notice, but it happening late at night, we don't. So one of the things I talked about with Eric is just making sure that we simplify the process and maybe more people know how to send out a notice, in the odd hours. So that was the other message. That was the other lesson I learned.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Bob. I was going to bring up that concept of the comms. I appreciate the message that we sent afterwards, of course. That was really helpful. I think we clarified a lot of pieces, but I certainly got a lot of questions and feedback about the comms. But, we were glad that you were focused on restoring power first and foremost. And so, as Bob said, the time that we can permit that would be helpful. Can I ask a maybe potential stupid engineering question? The transformer is getting fixed, but what it sounds like what you said is that the buried line is potentially caused it. We're not doing it. Like, are we like, what's to stop that from happening again very soon? Like, are we going to investigate the buried line area to find out where this is actually physically happening to try to fix that now? Or are we just?
No, we are not going to do it now because it's a direct bury line.
Right.
It was a redundant direct bury line.
I see.
So we are on an alternate feed, but say that one.
Our last delay.
It is.
Okay.
We have to replace the line with a different line in conduit this summer.
Okay.
But
I probably missed that before, so I apologize.
No. We won't be trying to dig up the existing faulted cable because it's beyond repair.
So what I mentioned before, we were talking about electric and costs and reserves is this project.
Right.
So what we're going to be doing is getting a proposal from an engineer to do the design, which will go from the bottom of Loop Road up to Kirkwood Drive, probably on the south side. And so we'll get a proposal for that. Once we have that, if it's under $25,000, which is my threshold, I'll approve it. If it's over that, we'll be bringing it back to EOP and the board for approval, so we can have a set of, the plan is to have a set of bid documents and have it out to bid by the adoption of the next year's fiscal budget, so they can start construction in July. So that is the plan for replacing it. We have to leave it now. But
But it's redundant, you're saying, so it's not, it's offline right now, what you're saying, or is it?
Yes, it's all.
So it's cut off now, so so we're on our last leg in the sense that we don't have the redundancy anymore.
correct.
Thank you. I want to make sure I understood that. Thank you. I see a hand up from the community. Jack? Go ahead, Jack.
Yeah, I'm on. I just want to hark back to Bob's comments and second them. Notification out to the community is really important here. I understand that everyone was all hands on deck trying to repair the outage, diagnose it, and then get it back up. But there's a second wave. I represent part of it. That is the HOAs. I was remote at that point in time, although I'm the president of our HOA at Lost Cabin. And our immediate thoughts are that we're propane dependent for our radiant heating, and any backup heating for us is electrical. We're trying to mobilize to adjust to the outages and getting no information. I think you do have to find a way to have people on staff who can get temporary word out as to what the expectations are, as well as I would suggest that you post on the website so that we're not dependent on FaceTime for trying to figure out who we need to get up to light our pilots and inspect our units that are not populated. Thanks.
Thank you, Jack. Noted. Okay. Anything else in the operations report? Okay, I just want to say thank you again, Randy, Rick, and staff. Really appreciate it. I'm really glad that you were able to get things going for the majority of our customers within minutes and then hours, and then we're doing the best I can. So thank you again for all the work on that. Okay, we'll move over to 13, standing committee reports. EOP, Peter?
I think we already discussed that when we're having another meeting coming up on
19th.
the 19th. Yeah.
3.
Okay.
So, and Bob, it accommodates your schedule too.
Yeah, thank you.
Finance, John?
We covered everything in the board package.
Okay, IT, Bob?
Didn't meet.
Okay, personnel, we covered all topics as agenda items there. Communications is in the board packet, so I won't say anything more that's in there. And LAFCO did not meet. Any questions, comments on, did I miss anything? Okay. Temporary advising committees, we do not have any. 15, general board discussion. Nothing. All right, then I will adjourn the meeting and remind everyone that our next regularly scheduled meeting is for Friday, April 4th, 2025 at 2 p.m. We'll see you all then. Thank you.